Chapter 1688. Sigh. If I had known that these questions were for Yen Huang College's medical school, I wouldn't have sold them so cheaply. In the side hall of the Hanging Pot Hall, Lin Jichang looked at Chang Feng's back and couldn't help but beat his chest and stomp his feet. Thinking back to when Chen Weining came to ask him for medical advice and claimed that each question would cost him 5 strings of coins, he felt that he had made a killing. After all he did was talk and he got 50 strings of coins in the end. But now that he thought about it, it was a huge loss. After all, Chen Weining only paid 50 strings of coins to buy a place in Yen Huang College's medical school. With Yen Huang College's current reputation in Tang, if the entrance exam questions could be bought, not to mention 50 strings of coins, even if it was 5,000 strings of coins, people would buy it. But since the matter had already passed, Lin Jichang knew that it was useless to regret it. But when he thought of Tang Yuan who had slipped away, his heart ached. I just don't know which big family that Chen Weining is from. She was so resourceful that she could get Yen Huang College's medical school's entrance exam questions a day in advance. I heard that the Turkic state preceptor tried to sneak into the college to steal books but failed. Could it be that the power behind this Chen Weining is even more terrifying than the Turkic state preceptor? Apart from his heartache, Lin Jichang also couldn't help but be curious about the identity of Chen Weining who came to the Hanging Pot Hall that day. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Chen Weining's identity was not simple. He felt that he knew a big secret, but he didn't dare to say it out because he was afraid that he would be killed. After all, Lin Jichang was the imperial physician of the Sui dynasty. He knew that those with real power could kill someone like him, who had no background, as easily as killing an ant. But this old man didn't know that this so-called Chen Weining didn't have any background at all, let alone someone from a big family. The person that Lin Jichang was thinking about was chatting with her sister, Chen Shuayu, in the small courtyard that they rented. When she and her sister first came to Chang'an, they lived in the city god temple because they didn't have money at that time. After Chen Shuayu swindled 100 strings of coins from Li Tai, Chen Shuayu rented a vacant farmhouse in Lantian County as a temporary shelter for them in the capital. Sis, should we wake up early tomorrow morning and go to Yen Huang College to look at the rankings? Yeah. What? Xiao Yu, you're going too? Of course I'm going. I want to see my sister get into Yen Huang College with my own eyes. Haha. Since you want to go, then go. But don't oversleep tomorrow. I won't. Alright. Sister. You've just washed all the clothes we bought. What should we wear to the academy tomorrow? At this moment, Chen Shuayu pointed at the colorful dresses hanging in the courtyard and frowned at Chen Shuazhen. Those clothes were the high-quality clothes that they had spent a lot of money to buy in order to get an answer from Lin Jichang. Chen Shuazhen said without thinking, "What else can I wear? Wearing what we're wearing?" Are we going to wear what we're wearing now? Hearing this, Chen Shuayu looked at the rough linen clothes that he and Chen Shuazhen were wearing, which were patched up like beggars' clothes, and was instantly dumbfounded. What? Xiao Yu, you've been living a life of luxury for a few days. Now you can't live a hard life? Chen Shuazhen couldn't help but tease. Sister. I'm not. Chen Shuayu hurriedly said. I just think that tomorrow is a big day for you to get into Yen Huang College. We should wear something nice. Dad and Mom will be very happy for you if they see you in heaven. Hearing Chen Shuayu mention her late parents, Chen Shuayu's heart softened. She went forward and patted Xiao Yu's head, then said softly, Silly girl, getting into Yen Huang College is just the beginning. We sisters will live a better life in the future. After pausing, Chen Shuazhen smiled playfully and said, But let's not wear the clothes that we bought before. Are you afraid that the people from Hanging Pot Hall won't recognize us? Hanging Pot Hall? Sister, what do you mean by that? How can people from Hanging Pot Hall go to Yen Huang College? Chen Shuayu was very confused. Chen Shuozhen waved her hand and said, "Why do you ask so many questions? Anyway, for the time being, we can't wear those clothes out. Oh, Marquis has helped us so much. We can't give him any trouble." "Oh, yes, sister." Chen Shuoyu nodded, but she didn't quite understand. On the other side, after Li Zixuan brought little Yu to the workshop, Li Zixuan went directly to the editorial department of Tang Daily, while Li Zixuan went to the research base of the Trump Card Project, in the depths of the workshop. Inside, you could see the busy figures of Yanhuang College's teachers and students everywhere. They were all carefully selected Yanhuang College's teachers and students who were proficient in mathematics, physics, and chemistry. Everyone else in the college was on summer vacation, so they took advantage of the summer vacation to devote themselves to the research of the college's Trump Card Project. "Yamacho, you're here." After passing through 2 courtyards, Li Zixuan bumped into a student, and this student looked very familiar. "Li Yan? You didn't go back during the summer vacation?" Li Zixuan was stunned for a moment before he came back to his senses. That's right, the student in front of him was Li Chuanfeng's son, Li Yan. Last year, this kid ranked in the top 5 in the entrance exam of Yanhuang College. Of course, it wasn't just the entrance exam. This child was also one of the top students in the academy's midterm and final exams. Unlike Bruiser, who was partial to his subjects, this child excelled in all of them, regardless of whether it was classics, mathematics, physics, chemistry, or geography. He could be considered to have a balanced development. At this time, Li Yan replied with a smile, "I'm going back to Yamacho. My family lives in Chang'an, so I can go back whenever I want. But I think it's more meaningful to work on the college's Trump Card Project in the workshop than to go back home. Besides, my father lives in the college now, so it doesn't make a difference whether he goes back home or not." "Haha, you child." Li Zixuan smiled happily. Then, as if he suddenly remembered something, he asked, "Oh, right, what has your father been busy with recently?" Li Yan thought for a moment and replied, "I don't know the specifics, but my father seems to be very confused recently." At this point, Li Yan seemed to have something to say. Li Zixuan asked curiously, "Confused? Taoist Li is so knowledgeable, but you also have times when you're confused?" Li Yan cupped his hands and said, "Yamacho is too kind. In fact, my father has been sorting out the orbits of other planets near the Earth through the Academy's telescope in recent months. He found that the orbits of these planets follow a certain pattern, but he hasn't completely found out what the pattern is. Also, are these patterns related to the heavenly axiom recorded in the Taoist classics? My father has been very confused." When Li Zixuan heard this, he immediately understood. Li Chunfeng had finally walked into the Hu Tong alley. There was going to be a collision between science and metaphysics. Haha. It seems like Taoist Li has gained a lot in the past 6 months. Li Zixuan came back to his senses and patted Li Yan's shoulder. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, your father is only at a dead end for now. When he really figures out these problems, he will be the most powerful person in Taoism in the past thousands of years." Li Zixuan could not provide any substantial help to Li Chuanfeng's confusion. It was hard to tell whether science and metaphysics were mutually exclusive, or if there was something in each of them. Especially after he had somehow transmigrated from the modern world to the Tang Dynasty, it was even harder for him to figure it out. Perhaps metaphysics was the end of science? This question could only be left to Li Chunfeng to figure it out himself. "Where's Qin? Suddenly, Li Zixuan recalled the purpose of his visit today, so he asked. Li Yan was still in shock from Li Zixuan's words. When he heard Li Zixuan's question, he subconsciously pointed to a courtyard in the north and said, "Let's go back to Yamacho. Qin should still be doing experiments there." "Okay. Go ahead and do your work." Li Zixuan patted Li Yan's shoulder and turned to walk towards the courtyard. Hey! Test. As soon as Li Zixuan arrived at the entrance of the courtyard, he heard Fatty's voice. He was slightly surprised because there was no one around him. However, as a modern person, Li Zixuan would not be frightened by this. He quickly found the source of the sound. There was a square wooden box hanging on the wall in front of him. There were many small round holes on the wooden box. Is this a loudspeaker? Li Zixuan was surprised. It was obvious that this was a sound transmission device. Li Tai used a wire to transmit sound from inside the courtyard to outside. Qingke, I can hear it from outside. And I can hear it very clearly. Inside the courtyard, someone shouted into the house. Is that Sun Zifan? Li Zixuan hurriedly stepped into the courtyard and saw Sun Zifan facing the room with his back to him. What are you guys doing? Li Zixuan could not help but ask. Yamacho, you're here. Sun Zifan turned around and saw Li Zixuan. He quickly greeted him warmly and said with a smile, Yamacho, Qingke wants to make a set of communicators for the academy before going to Taiyuan. Now we are doing experiments in the workshop. Communicators? What's that? Li Zixuan frowned. Right at this moment, Qin Huayu ran in while gasping for breath, and then he said loudly, Zifan, quickly tell Qingke that she can hear from the outer court. Chapter 1689. Qingke, what are you doing with Zifan and the others? In the deepest courtyard of the workshop, Li Zixuan walked into the house and asked Li Tai, who was holding a cylindrical object. Behind him were Sun Zifan, Qin Huayu, Li Huairan, Yuqi Baolin, and the others. After Qin Huayu came to report, Li Huayu, Yuqi Baolin, and the others also ran over from all corners of the workshop. Oh, Yamacho is here? Li Tai heard the voice and quickly put down the thing in his hand. He turned to Li Zixuan and said, Yamacho, we did it. Our experiment was a success. Standing beside Li Tai was Mo Chue from the college's physics department. He was not only a candidate for the next generation of the Mo family, but also the technical backbone of Yanhuang College's Trump Card project. At this time, he was also excited. Li Zixuan heard this and was a little confused. He asked, Qingke, what did you say? Are you talking about those loudspeakers outside? Yes, yes, yes. Yes, those loudspeakers. Li Tai nodded fiercely. Then he picked up a blueprint and walked quickly to Li Zixuan. He said excitedly, Yamacho, you told me that there were 2 ways to improve the telephone. One was to add a filter circuit inside the telephone to filter out the noise and make the sound clearer. The other was to add a signal modulation and demodulation circuit to reduce the signal attenuation and let the sound travel farther. Later, I thought about it. The second method is more complicated and needs a long time to study, so I wanted to try the first method these days. I tested a lot of filter circuits with different parameters to make the sound of the phone clearer. Now it seems that we have almost succeeded. I see. When Li Zixuan heard this, he instantly understood. He pinched his chin and nodded, saying, just now I also heard it from outside. The sound is much clearer than before. The improvement you made is indeed useful. Yes. Not bad, not bad. Qingke, you are very good at doing things. This is all thanks to Mr. Mo Chue and Zifan's help. After being praised by Li Zixuan, Li Tai was a little proud. Suddenly, he thought of something and said, Oh, right, Yamacho. We are not doing this purely to improve the telegraph. I want to install this thing in every corner of the academy. This way, when the academy needs to inform the students and teachers of important matters, they can use this to transmit the information to every corner of the academy. It will be many times more convenient than before. Yamacho, what do you think? Install this thing in the college? Hearing this, Li Zixuan. According to Li Tai's words, this was equivalent to installing a campus radio. Then, in the future, in the college, in the future, the academy. Is this thinking, this little fatty's thinking? Li. Yes. It just so happens that the college has already been electrified. It is just the right time to install this thing. Oh, let's call this thing the cable radio in the future. After all, this thing is only used to transmit information over a short distance. Its function is still somewhat different from a telephone. After a pause, Li Zixuan came back to his senses and looked at Li Tai with admiration. Cable radio? Spread it widely. Yamacho is a good name. A glint flashed across Mo Chue's eyes as he cupped his hands with a smile. I also think that Yamacho is a good name. In that case, let's call this thing the cable radio in the future. Li Tai did not have any objections to the name. He smiled and said. Li Zixuan looked at the experiment table full of various machines behind Li Tai. He straightened his face and said, Qin-Ke, whether it's the telephone or the cable radio, they aren't very urgent matters. Your most urgent task right now is to build the 2 telegraph relay stations in Bingzhou and Yunzhou. These 2 days, the teachers of the academy have been busy marking the exam papers. Once the results are released tomorrow, the teachers and students of the academy's trump card project will have to leave for the north. You must finish building and adjusting the 2 telegraph relay stations within 3 months. In truth, Li Tai's campus broadcast had truly surprised Li Zixuan, but that was all. He understood that with the impending war, inventions like the cable radio that could only increase the entertainment value of life were irrelevant. It would be good if they existed, but if they didn't, it would not affect the daily lives of the people of the Great Tang. However, the telegraph relay stations were different. This thing was related to the direction of the war between the Great Tang and the Turks in a few months. It was related to the lives of millions of people in the Great Tang. Thus, Li Zixuan could not help but be anxious. Li Tai said with a solemn expression, Yamacho, Tai does not dare to forget the task of building the telegraph relay stations. A few days ago, I ordered the craftsmen to start producing the components needed to build the telegraph relay stations and the steam engines needed to build the thermal power stations. These things can only be made in the workshop. They can't be made anywhere else. As for the cable radio, it's something that we made in our free time. I hope that it can be installed in the academy before we go to Taiyuan. This won't affect the construction of the telegraph relay stations. Li Tai was right. Whether it was the telegraph relay stations or the thermal power stations, they were all technologies that surpassed the technology of this era. The components needed could only be built in the new workshop of the Curious Pavilion. This was because the workshop not only had skilled craftsmen, but also some machinery that could not be found anywhere else. It was no exaggeration to say that the new workshop of the Curious Pavilion could represent the most advanced production technology in the world. Mo Chue also interjected, Yamacho, Qin-Ke is right. The workshop has already gathered a group of top craftsmen to make the components needed for the telegraph relay stations and the thermal power stations. They should be finished the day after tomorrow. As long as the initial tests in the workshop are successful, we can bring these things to Bing Province and Yunzhou. Li Zixuan breathed a sigh of relief and said, That's good. After the initial tests in the workshop are successful the day after tomorrow, you can set off immediately. This time, Mr. Mo still has to preside over the construction of the protective formation and the medical school. He really can't leave. Mo Chue, you'll have to work hard and go with Qin-Ke. The teachers and students in the Academy's Trump Card Project are completely at your disposal. In addition, Qin-Ke, apply to His Majesty for a team of guards to personally escort you to Bing Province and Yunzhou to avoid any accidents. Mo Chue and Li Tai cupped their hands and replied, Yes, Yamacho. Li Zixuan nodded and said, Yes, then you can continue with your work. I'll go to the steel mill to take a look. Chapter 1690. Hongxing, how's the forging of the new batch of armor coming along? After leaving the research base of the Trump Card Project, Li Zixuan came to the steel mill. At this time, Zhang Hongxing was instructing the craftsmen to move things. Li Zixuan went up to him and asked when Zhang Hongxing was free. "Marquis, you're here?" Zhang Hongxing heard the voice and quickly turned around. He first wiped the sweat on his forehead, then replied with a smile, "Marquis, you've come at the right time today. The 5,000 sets of plate armor, vanadium steel horse lance, and vanadium steel horse armor that you ordered have all been completed today. Now, the craftsmen are bringing the workers from the Riverside workshop to transport the armor here. Tomorrow, Marquis should be able to bring people to transport this batch of armor to the barracks tomorrow." "They've all been completed?" Li Zishuan raised his eyebrows and showed a little shock on his face. In just over a month, the workshop had completed 5,000 sets of plate armor, horse lance, and horse armor. This speed was completely miraculous. Of course, the reason for such a fast speed was mainly because the workshop had invested a lot of manpower, material resources, and financial resources to produce this batch of armor. First of all, in order to produce the armor for so many years, the workshop had invested close to 3,000 craftsmen, not including the civilian workers. Secondly, Kushirqing was in charge of the Sichuan region, supplying the workshop with a steady stream of vanadium ores, providing a solid material foundation for the production of armor. Lastly, and most importantly, in order to produce new equipment, the workshop had specially developed hydraulic stamping machines, using machines to replace manpower. Naturally, this would greatly increase the production speed of armor and equipment. Yes, Marquis. If you don't believe me, you can come here tomorrow to count the number. Zhang Hongxing's face was solemn as he clasped his fist and said. Li Zishuan quickly waved his hand and said, "No, no, no. It's not that I don't believe you, I'm just a little surprised. To be able to complete such a difficult task in such a short period of time, it shows that not only are your skills superb, but your leadership skills are also outstanding." Hearing this, Zhang Hongxing let out a sigh of relief. He scratched his head and laughed. "Marquis, you flatter me. To be able to forge 5,000 sets of armor in such a short time, I wouldn't have even dared to think about it in the past. The reason we were able to complete it was mainly due to the large number of craftsmen in our workshop. Also, Marquis, the hydraulic press machine that you previously built played a crucial role. All of this is the result of everyone's hard work day and night. It has nothing to do with me." Li Zishuan patted Zhang Hongxing's shoulder and said with a smile, "Hongxing, you're too modest. To be able to make these thousands of craftsmen work together as one is enough to show your ability. With these new armors, the strength of the imperial court will definitely be stronger than before." Hearing this, Zhang Hongxing's eyes widened and he said in surprise, "Marquis, is there going to be a war in the imperial court soon?" This fellow was usually immersed in forging and naturally did not hear about the recent tense situation between the Tang Empire and the Turks. In addition, ordinary people did not know the exact time of the war between the Tang Empire and the Turk. Only the civil and military officials knew the approximate time. Li Zishuan's face turned serious and he nodded. Yes. This war concerns the fate of the Tang Empire." Chapter 1691. Faubert, who had been an artisan all his life, knew better than anyone else how important the machine tool Li Zishuan described was. Li Zishuan calling it the mother of industry was not an exaggeration at all. With this thing, they could quickly produce standard parts of uniform sizes and machines to produce other industrial products. It was simply the mother machine of industry. In addition, Faubert's concerns were very realistic. After all, not long ago, Yanhuang College, which had many experts protecting it, had been attacked by the Turkic state preceptor. Many confidential information had been stolen. He was just an old man with one foot in the grave. How could he protect such a huge secret for Li Zishuan? But to Li Zishuan, Faubert was the person who had been with him the longest. His loyalty was definitely higher than anyone else's, so he would give the machine tool blueprint to Faubert. However, after the Turkic state preceptor's theft of the Academy's information, he had to pay attention to the issue of safety. Faubert, you are a person of virtue and prestige. You are the most worthy person to entrust these blueprints to. However, what you said just now also has a certain degree of truth. After all, these blueprints are of great importance. It is inevitable that there will be people coveting them. When the time comes, it will bring you danger. If that happens, I will really die 1,000 times. After pondering for a moment, Li Zixuan looked at Faubert and solemnly said, "Therefore, for the sake of safety, it is better to store these blueprints in the Academy's confidential archives. Faubert, if you need to consult them, you can directly go to the Academy's archives to consult. If necessary, you can also copy some of the blueprints for production purposes." After the Turkic state preceptor's theft of the Academy's information, not only did Li Er pay more attention to the Academy's security, but the Academy itself also did a lot of work in this regard. First was the recruitment of more than 500 guards. This was being carried out in an orderly manner. Another was the construction of the mountain-protecting formation. This was gradually being carried out under Mo Huai's leadership. After everything was ready, Yanhuang College would be the safest place in the entire Lantian County. It was believed that even if the Turkic state preceptor came again, he would not be able to obtain any benefits. Hearing this, Faubert nodded with a smile. Yes, young master's arrangement should be the best. Li Zixuan rolled up the blueprints on the table again. Then he continued, "Faubert, these machine tools have extremely high requirements for precision, and it is extremely difficult to produce them. And I'm afraid that a lot of energy will be consumed in this process. It's just a matter of the best craftsmanship and the highest quality machine tools. We don't ask for the fastest speed. Only the best craftsmanship and the highest quality, the highest." As a modern man, Li Zixuan understood better than anyone how difficult it was to produce machine tools. When the new China was first established, its industrial foundation was extremely backward and it urgently needed all kinds of machine tools. But at that time, due to the technological blockade by the Western powers, the new China could only buy the finished machine tools, but not the technology to manufacture them. In the end, in order to realize the independent production of machine tools, countless scientists worked day and night, painstakingly for several years, before finally creating a machine tool. The great Tang's current industrial foundation was undoubtedly weaker than when the new China was first established. It was even more difficult to manufacture machine tools. Even with a prophet like him guiding the way, there were still many difficulties in actually doing it. Chapter 1692. Chiua Wui? Chi Shi. Not as good as Z's clothes, peaceful and auspicious. Chiua Wui? Lu Shi. Not as good as Z's clothes, peaceful and auspicious. Li Zixuan returned to Yunshan and coincidentally met Wang Ji, who was humming a tune as he walked down the mountain. Having transmigrated to this era, Li Zixuan had experienced the influence of many great scholars around him. Very quickly, he was able to distinguish what Wang Ji was humming. It was the Qin Feng, Naked from the Book of Songs. Modern people usually only studied and appreciated the Book of Songs from a purely literary point of view. Little did they know that every line in the Book of Songs was a beautiful line of lyrics. It was more commonly treated as a song in ancient times. Listening to Wang Ji's melodious and rhythmic hum, Li Zixuan paused and savored it. When Wang Ji walked up to him, he couldn't help but interrupt. "Mr. Wang, what happy occasion did you catch? Why are you so happy?" "Yo, it's Yamacho." Wang Ji was immersed in humming and didn't notice other people on the side of the road. When he heard Li Zixuan's voice, he subconsciously paused and turned his head to look. Then, he smiled and walked up to him. "Haha. I finally finished marking the papers. Of course I'm happy. Sigh. There are too many papers. Our academy needs to recruit a new batch of teachers. This time, if Mr. Yen hadn't used the assembly line method that Mountain Head Elder suggested and mobilized everyone in the academy to mark the papers, it would have been impossible to finish marking more than 10,000 papers in 3 days. This time, there were nearly 10,000 people participating in the Yenhuang College's medical and engineering entrance exams. There were more than 10,000 papers accumulated. Under normal circumstances, with the current number of teachers in the academy, it would be impossible to finish marking so many papers without at least 10 days to half a month. However, they couldn't let the students from all over the Tang Empire wait in Chang'an for 10 days to half a month, could they? At the crucial moment, Yen Silo made a prompt decision and decided to use the assembly line work method. Questions with fixed answers such as multiple choice, fill in the blank, and judgment questions were given to teachers who didn't specialize in the subject and other people who could read, such as the guards of the academy, the editors in the editorial department of Datong Daily, and the scribes urgently sent by Li Tai, Li Ku, and Li Chengqian, to mark them. The rest of the questions, and policy questions that had more flexible answers were given to teachers who specialized in the subject to mark. In these 3 days, the teachers who were marking the papers in the academy could only sleep for 4 to 6 hours a day, let alone leave the academy. They ate, drank, and lived in the academy. In addition, all the papers in the entrance exam were covered. Moreover, every paper that had been marked was checked by a special person, so generally, there wouldn't be a situation where students and teachers colluded with each other to cheat. It was because of this assembly line work method and the hard work of all the workers in the academy that Yenhuang College was able to finish marking all the papers in the entrance exam on the eve of the release of the results. Of course, this incident also exposed a serious problem that the academy was facing at the moment, and that was the lack of teachers. Especially when the next batch of students came, the lack of teachers would be more serious. So this problem had to be solved as soon as possible. The academy is indeed in urgent need of teachers. I have already discussed this matter with Mr. Kong Gue. After tomorrow, we will start to recruit teachers. A few days ago, Datong Daily has already published a notice for teachers in the academy. I believe this problem will be solved soon. After pondering for a moment, Li Zishuan looked at Wang Ji and said. Wang Ji shook his head, sighed, and said, "Sigh. It's troublesome to recruit these people. Who knows, we might even have to tutor them. We won't have any free time." Li Zishuan thought for a moment and said, "The teachers of classics and mathematics don't need special guidance because the Academy's classics and mathematics teaching materials have long been circulated outside. However, the teachers of physics, chemistry, and geography need specific guidance from the original teachers of the Academy. After all, they have never learned this knowledge before. But this doesn't matter. Didn't the current teachers of the Academy start from scratch? When Yenhuang College was established last year, many people didn't even know what engineering was. This caused the Academy to be in a great predicament when recruiting teachers. In the end, Li Zishuan took a special approach. He first recruited a group of people with strong learning abilities, flexible minds, and not pedantic pedantry. Then, he let these people start school a month earlier than the students. Because the first month of school was military training, these people had 2 months to study the Academy's teaching materials. Moreover, Li Zishuan also formulated a strict assessment, reward, and punishment system. Fortunately, in the end, all the teachers passed. Wang Ji even obtained the first place in the chemistry group and became the subject leader of the chemistry group in the academy. Engineering had been developed for nearly a year. The classics and mathematics teaching materials in the academy were not confidential to the public. Now, the classics and mathematics teaching materials of the academy could be bought in every county in the Tang Empire. Therefore, in this year, there were probably many masters of mathematics among the people. But why didn't these people participate in the Yenhuang College's entrance examination? It was mainly because they didn't fit the age requirement. Yenhuang College's admission age was 12 and below. However, those who didn't fit the age requirement but had outstanding mathematics ability weren't unable to get into Yenhuang College. They could apply for the teachers of Yenhuang College. Therefore, in theory, the teachers recruited by the mathematics department of the academy this year were much better than last year's. But physics, chemistry, and geography were different. The teaching materials for these three subjects were classified in the academy, and students were not allowed to take them out of the academy, much less buy them outside. Li Zixuan would never allow these books that could rapidly increase the people's understanding of the natural world and their understanding of tools to be leaked to other countries. At the very least, before the great Tang became invincible in the world, he would not allow these teaching materials to be made available to the outside world. Therefore, the recruitment of teachers for the three departments of the academy was actually similar to last year's. They would pick some people with good aptitude to apply what they have learned. The only difference was that after these people were recruited this year, there would be many seniors guiding them in their learning. Haha. Back then, when the teachers of the academy were collectively assessed, I almost lost my life to fight with Yen Kongue. Let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it. If Yamacho doesn't have any other instructions, this old man will go down the mountain for a drink. Wang Ji laughed and said half-jokingly. He was talking about last year's examination organized by Li Zixuan after the teachers of the academy had self-studied for 2 months. At that time, in order to get first place in the chemistry group and win the bet with Yen Silu, he studied day and night for 2 months. In the end, after the examination, he directly fainted. Haha. Mr. Wang, please wait for a moment. I have something to discuss with you. Li Zixuan smiled. He suddenly recalled something and hurriedly said, "Oh? What is it?" Wang Ji stopped in his tracks and asked curiously. Haha. This isn't the place to talk. Mr. Wang, please follow me to the meeting room. I won't take up too much of your time. Haha. Okay. The two of them quickly arrived at the meeting room on the first floor of the Academy's Guanghua building. Li Zixuan took out a piece of xian paper and handed it to Wang Ji. Wang Ji took a look and saw that the paper was full of strange symbols. If an outsider saw this, they would definitely think that it was scribbles. However, Wang Ji could see that this piece of xian paper was full of chemical equations. Yamacho, this is? Wang Ji's face suddenly became serious. He had a hunch that what Li Zixuan was going to say next was very important. This was because in the chemical equations written on this piece of paper, there were a few chemicals that he had never seen before. To be precise, he had never seen the real thing, not the chemical symbols. Li Zixuan stood up and said with his hands behind his back, "I plan to ask the workshop to build a few special lathes. These lathes need a new alloy, and the new alloy needs a few new metal materials. I have just told Faubert to look for the corresponding mineral veins for these new metal materials. I believe that it won't be long before the new ores are shipped back. When the time comes, I would like to ask Mr. Wang to help me refine the ores. This piece of paper has recorded the refining principles and conditions for these ores. Please keep it well, Mr. Wang." "What? New metal materials?" Wang Ji heard this and suddenly stood up. He said excitedly, "Yamacho, are we going to find new metal materials? That's great." Speaking of this, he took the piece of paper in front of his eyes and looked at it carefully. Then he murmured, "Tungsten, molybdenum, chromium, Yamacho, there is finally hope to add 3 new actual members to the periodic table of chemical elements that you previously wrote." When Li Zixuan was writing chemistry textbooks, he encountered a very awkward problem. In this era, there were many chemical elements that people could not recognize. Chemistry was mainly about the way to transform the element. If they did not even have the basic material elements, how could they write textbooks? In the end, he still couldn't solve this problem. He could only act as a charlatan and, prophetically, put the complete periodic table of chemical elements in the textbooks. The textbooks often involved some unknown substances. Li Zixuan always told the teachers in the academy that although these substances weren't found yet, they would definitely be found in the future. Therefore, verifying the accuracy of the periodic table of chemical elements became the lifelong pursuit and goal of all the teachers in Yanhuang College's chemistry department. Now that he heard that Li Zixuan might find 3 new metal materials, how could Wang Ji not be excited? Yes, that's right. Li Zixuan nodded and then said solemnly, "These metal materials have a wide range of uses. Extracting them as soon as possible will be very important for the future development of Tang Empire's industry. I'll be leaving Lantian County the day after tomorrow. I'll leave these matters to Mr. Wang. If there are any problems, remember to ask Qinke to contact me." Wang Ji immediately cupped his hands and said solemnly, "Yes, Yamacho." Li Zixuan waved his hand and said half-jokingly, "All right. If there's nothing else, I won't disturb Mr. Wang from going down the mountain to drink. Ha! Ha! No disturbances, no disturbances. Yamacho, if you can find a few more new materials, I'm willing to not drink for a month." Chapter 1693. Li Zixuan turned around and left the conference room. Wang Ji carefully folded the paper full of chemical symbols and put it in his arms. He patted it to make sure it was in good shape before he left the teaching building and went to the workshop at the foot of the mountain. After obtaining such a big secret, Wang Ji didn't care about going down the mountain to drink. He just wanted to join the scientific research. What he said to Li Zixuan just now was not a joke. If Li Zixuan could really find a few more new substances, he, as an old drunkard, was willing to give up drinking for a month. This was Wang Ji's obsession. He hoped that he could see all the elements in the periodic table of chemical elements being found and verified one by one in his lifetime. That way, even if he died, he could die with a clear mind. Wang Ji used to be half a Taoist priest. In addition to studying, his biggest hobby was drinking. Of course, as a Taoist priest, it was inevitable that he would come into contact with some alchemy method. However, Wang Ji didn't have a famous teacher to guide him on the path of Taoism. Even when it came to alchemy, he was still messing around blindly. Last year, he heard that Yanhuang College was an interesting place. Then, under the encouragement of his old friends, he joined Yanhuang College. After coming into contact with the chemistry textbooks compiled by Li Zixuan, he suddenly felt that the door of a new world was opening for him. The periodic table of elements drawn by Li Zixuan was even more shocking to Wang Ji. At first, he didn't believe it, but later on, one chemical experiment after another proved that chemical reactions were the way to transform elements. Although many elements in the periodic table of elements couldn't be found, the chemical reactions of existing elements could indirectly prove the validity of the periodic table of elements. In addition, this year, Li Zixuan sent Fu Bin to Sichuan to look for vanadium ore. What was amazing was that Fu Bin actually found it in Sichuan. Later on, Wang Ji refined vanadium according to the method provided by Li Zixuan. This made Wang Ji completely believe in Li Zixuan's periodic table of chemistry, and also made Wang Ji worship Li Zixuan like a god. In Wang Ji's eyes, the chemistry textbooks and periodic table of elements compiled by Li Zixuan were worthy of being called the Heavenly Book, a heavenly book that predicted all the chemical elements that existed in nature. Wang Ji didn't know why Li Zixuan was able to write the periodic table of elements, compile the chemistry textbooks, and accurately predict the chemical elements that were unknown but did exist. He didn't know, but he didn't dare to ask because he was born as a human being. He was in awe of the heavens and the earth, but he was even more in awe of the gods. After Li Zixuan told Wang Ji about the matter of refining the ore, he didn't immediately leave Yunshan. Instead, he went to find Yen Silu to discuss the recruitment of teachers for the academy. According to his plan, he would go to the military camp the day after tomorrow. Therefore, when the academy recruited teachers, he definitely wouldn't be able to make it. That night when the academy was attacked, Li Gang was seriously injured. Although he was later rescued and his body was fine, he was after all an old man. That injury had damaged his vitality. Now, Li Gang's energy was much weaker than before. Therefore, the overall teaching affairs of the academy were slowly handed over to Yen Silu. As the academy had just finished marking all the entrance examination papers in the afternoon, Yen Silu was organizing the mathematics teachers to tally the scores. Li Zixuan waited outside the office for a long time before Yen Silu was free to leave. Chapter 1694. Yamacho, you've come to the academy? After chatting with Yen Silu for a while, Li Zixuan left the teaching building and prepared to go down the mountain to return to the county. He didn't expect to meet Li Ku, who was also preparing to go down the mountain, at the entrance of the mountain path. Li Ku was pleasantly surprised to see Li Zixuan. He quickly stopped and greeted him. Actually, ever since he returned from the north, Li Zixuan had rarely seen Li Zixuan in the academy. One reason was because Li Zixuan was busy with work in the imperial court. For example, when the dragon sect attacked Chang'an City, if not for Li Zixuan's preparation, the Tang Empire might have suffered a great loss. Another reason was that Li Zixuan also had a lot of work to deal with in the workshop. Adding both sides together, he could not leave. This directly caused the number of times he came to the academy to sharply decrease. Yes, I'm here to discuss some matters with Mr. Yen. Li Zixuan smiled and replied. Then, he asked, Little Ku, are you going down the mountain to return to Chang'an? Li Zixuan asked because Li Ku had a blue bag slung over his shoulder. Of course, looking at the scene before him, Li Zixuan had to sigh that the Yanhuang Academy, with its strict system, was really a good place to train people. Thinking back to the days when Li Ku, Li Tai, Qing Chumo, and Zhang Sun Chong were the second generation of the royal family or young masters who lived like princes. Weren't they surrounded by servants and attendants wherever they went? At that time, no one would be willing to carry the burden from Chang'an to Lantian County, let alone let them carry the burden. Now, after a year of training in Yanhuang College, these pampered children had gradually learned to be independent. This was a good thing. After all, the future of the Tang Empire belonged to the young people. When Qin Qiong, Qing Yaojin, Li Jing, and Zhang Sun Wuji's generation grew old, these young people would have to shoulder the heavy responsibility of revitalizing the Tang Empire. And with their pampered temperament, they would definitely not be able to shoulder this heavy responsibility. Yes, the Academy's classes for this semester have ended, and I can't interfere with the killer project at the workshop. You know, Yamacho, I'm not good at investigating things, so I want to go back to Chang'an to completely rectify the internal problems of the Yanhuang Bank. After all, when the students and the Yamacho went north to exterminate the locusts, we discovered many corruption problems in the bank. Li Ku tightened the bag on his shoulder, and looked at Li with a respectful expression. Li Zixuan's eyes narrowed. Only then did he recall that half a month ago, when they were heading north to exterminate the locusts, they had encountered the shopkeeper of the Xinfeng County branch of the Yanhuang Bank, Jin Wanfu, who had accepted bribes from the local grain merchants and illegally lent out loans. As the issuing organization of the Great Tang's official banknotes, the Yanhuang Bank bore too much of Li Zixuan's expectations. This was an extremely important department, and Li Zixuan would not allow any parasites to exist in it. Thus, he had ordered his men to arrest Jin Wanfu and hand him over to the imperial court for investigation. Yes, regarding the reform of the bank's supervision system, it must be implemented as soon as possible. You are the most suitable person to handle this matter. I hope that the Yanhuang Bank's gold-robed guards can be established as soon as possible. After a moment of silence, Li Zixuan patted Li Ku's shoulder and said in a serious tone. Chapter 1695. When they returned to the county town, the sky was gradually darkening. Li Jingma, Yi Yuzhu, and Yi Guozhong were chatting in the main hall. Han Yushi was not there. At this time, she must be in the kitchen arranging for someone to make dinner. Although Li Zishuan was now a marquis and the Li family had become a noble, Li Jingma, Yi Yuzhu, and Han Yushi did not have the arrogant, cold, and arrogant attitude of a noble. Usually, Han Yushi and Madame Li would personally participate in the kitchen when they had time. Although this made the work of the Li family's cook much easier, it did not make her feel relaxed at all. After all, her duty in the Li family was to cook. Xian is back. As soon as Li Zishuan stepped into the front hall, Yi Yuzhu stood up from her chair and said with a loving expression, "And, father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, what are you all talking about? This child can hear your laughter from far away." Li Zishuan smiled and said, "Humph, you child, I can't see you all day long. If it wasn't for the dark, you would have forgotten that you still have a home in the county town." Li Jingma did not give his son any face. He coldly snorted and said with a dark face. He couldn't be blamed for his sharp tongue. It was just that Li Zishuan had been running outside every day. In the past few months, excluding the time he spent eating and sleeping at home, the amount of time Li Zishuan spent at home was pitifully little. This made Li Jingma, who thought that after his son became a high-ranking official, he would not have to worry about food and clothing, and that the family would be able to enjoy the joy of a family reunion together. Li Zishuan's expression froze, and his face was filled with embarrassment. Yi Yuzhu rolled her eyes at Li Jingma and said, "You old thing, our son runs out because he is busy with official business. Xian works so hard. In the end, isn't it for our family? In the end, you're here making sarcastic remarks. Do you still look like a father?" After being scolded by Yi Yuzhu, Li Jingma's face turned red. He wanted to say something, but he didn't dare. After all, Yi Yuzhu's family was sitting across from him. However, if he didn't say anything, he would lose face. He was in a dilemma. "It's too hard for me." In the end, Li Jingma sighed and decided not to say anything. "Mother! Don't say that, father. I've been too busy recently and couldn't be by your side to fulfill my filial duties. It's my fault. Father is right." Li Zishuan looked at his father sympathetically, but they were father and son after all. He hurriedly stepped forward to help his father out. "Ha ha! You brat!" Mrs. Li smiled and said, "Mother and your father are still healthy. We don't need you to stay by our side and take care of them. You just need to focus on your business. But my son, don't tire yourself out." "Ha ha!" Little Xian, in grandmother's opinion, if you and Yushi can give birth to a chubby grandson for your father, even if you don't come back for 10 days or half a month, your father won't say anything. Looking at the warm daily life of this family, Mrs. Yi, who was sitting to the side, couldn't help but laugh. As soon as she finished speaking, the room suddenly quieted down. Li Jingma couldn't help but sit up straight. His eyes flashed with a hint of desire. Obviously, Mrs. Ye's words had really poked his heart. He and Yi Yuzhu had children late in life. Now that Li Zishuan had finally started his own family, the two of them weren't young anymore. It was time for them to have grandchildren. Being urged to have a child by his grandmother, no matter how thick-skinned Li Zishuan was, he couldn't help but blush. After all, this was a matter between him and Han Yushi. How could it be brought up in public? "Father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, it's time to eat. Ah, husband, you're back." Just as the room fell into a honeyed silence, Han Yushi walked in and broke the silence. After seeing Li Zishuan in the hall, Han Yushi's face was slightly happy. However, a trace of imperceptible shyness flashed in her eyes. "Wife, you've worked hard." Li Zishuan nodded at Han Yushi. "Ha! Since that's the case, let's eat first. Little Xian has been running around outside all day. He must be hungry." Yushi, let the servants serve the dishes. Although Mrs. Li also wanted to follow Mrs. Ye's wishes and let Li Zixuan quickly give birth to a chubby son for the old couple, now that Han Yushi was also here, it wasn't appropriate to talk about this. Therefore, she hurriedly said to Han Yushi as if nothing had happened. Yes, mother. Han Yushi responded, then turned around and went out to instruct the servants to serve the dishes. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Li Zixuan seemed to have heard Han Yushi's soft sigh. He thought to himself, could it be that my wife had been standing outside for a while? Father, mother, the new batch of equipment for the Black Armored Army that His Majesty had ordered has been completed. I plan to bring those things to the army camp in the morning after tomorrow. In the next few months, I might not have the opportunity to come back. When dinner was almost finished, Li Zixuan suddenly put down his bowl and chopsticks and spoke apologetically. Previously, Li Zixuan had complained that his son was always away from home. Now, he had suggested that he would be away from home for a long time. Facing the two elders in front of him, it would be a lie if he said that he didn't feel guilty. As soon as he finished speaking, the lively dining table suddenly quieted down and the atmosphere became somewhat gloomy. Li Jingma and Yi Yuzhu also put down their bowls and chopsticks, a trace of worry flashing across their faces. In fact, on the day that Li Zixuan was appointed as an adjutant of the Black Armored Army, the two of them had already mentally prepared themselves for Li Zixuan to enter the army camp. However, the incident of going up north to exterminate locusts had been in the middle of it for almost a month. Now that Li Zixuan mentioned it again, the two elders were somewhat caught off guard. Go. Without everyone, how can there be a small family? Only when the Tang Empire is strong and prosperous and no longer has to be afraid of external harassment can we live in peace. Since His Majesty thinks so highly of you, then go. You don't have to worry about the family. Your father and mother can take care of themselves. Besides, don't we still have Yushi? Unexpectedly, the person who spoke up to persuade Li Zixuan was actually Li Jingma. Although Old Man Li had grumbled about Li Zixuan earlier, that was only a private joke. In the face of a serious matter, Old Man Li was still very clear about what was right and what was wrong. Madame Li opened her mouth, but in the end she swallowed the words of urging him to stay. In the end she still worriedly reminded, Mother doesn't care where you go. You must ensure that you are safe and healthy, do you understand? Li Zixuan nodded and said, Mother, don't worry. With my abilities, there aren't many people in this world who can hurt me. Besides, I'm only going to the army camp this time. It's very safe. Only going to the army camp? Actually, even Li Zixuan didn't believe these words. Since Li Er had made him the Black Armored Army adjutant and let him train the Black Armored Army to adapt to the new equipment, then in the future war between Tang and the Turks, Li Er would very likely let Li Zixuan accompany the army. This war was the fate of the country and also fate. Li Zixuan couldn't escape from it. Besides, the battle at Longmen Pass also allowed Li Zixuan to see the combat power of the world's #1 Turkic Wolf cavalry. When the Turkic army arrived at Longmen Pass, Li Zixuan was severely injured and unconscious, but he was conscious at that time. He could clearly hear the roars of the mountains and the shaking of the mountains below the city walls. In addition, he had heard from Xian Qing about the dangers of the battle at Longmen Pass, and also heard from Cheng Yaojin about the desperate pursuit of the Turkic Wolf cavalry. This gave Li Zixuan a more direct understanding of the current strength of the Turks. The Turks were truly powerful. In history, the great Tang had relied heavily on luck to defeat the Turk. Perhaps it was the will of the heavens. But the Turks had yet to encounter a natural disaster, and the great Tang didn't have the support of the heavens in the war with the Turks. Could the great Tang really win? This was an unknown. After coming to this world for more than a year, Li Zixuan had already assimilated himself into this era. He had the pride of a Tang person in his bones. His family, lovers, and friends all lived on this land. He wouldn't allow all that he had to be destroyed by the Turks. Thus, if Li Er wanted him to go to the battlefield, he would definitely do it without hesitation. He wanted to personally eliminate this uncertain factor, the Turks, with his own hands. But even so, he didn't dare to say that he wanted to go to the battlefield. Otherwise, his two elders would definitely be worried sick. After all, he was the only son of the Li clan. Since you're going to the army camp, you should prepare tomorrow. The military rules are strict. You have to be careful and not be impulsive. Understand? Li Jingma said after a moment of silence. I understand, father. Li Zishuan hurriedly replied. Li Jingma nodded, then put down his chopsticks and got up. Ai. This old man is tired. You guys continue eating. This old man is going back to his room to rest. Then, he turned and left. Father Li was tired. Mother is also full. Eat slowly. After you're done, accompany Yushi. Madame Li forced a smile on her face, said a few words, and left. Little Xian, national affairs are important, but you have to consider your father and mother's feelings. It really wasn't easy for the two of them to bring you up. That's all I have to say. This old man is also going back to rest. Yi Guozhong patted Li Zishuan's shoulder and said a few words. But then he hesitated. Finally, he sighed and left with Madame Yi. Li Zishuan was silent. He understood the hidden meaning in Yi Guozhong's words. It was nothing more than letting Li Jingma and Yi Yuzhu have a grandson as soon as possible so that the Li clan would have descendants. Only then would the two elders have something to rely on. After all, there were 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants was the worst. This was a concept that had been passed down for thousands of years in Chinese. No one could change it. But his wife was indeed still young. It was not suitable for her to have a child now. Li Zishuan watched the 2 elders of the Yi clan leave, then looked at Han Yushi beside him. He couldn't help but feel conflicted. Chapter 1696. Husband, let's have a child, shall we? After dinner, Li Zishuan, Yi Yuzhu, and the 2 elders of the Yi family all returned to their rooms to rest. The elders all left Li Zishuan at home for Han Yushi. For some reason, Han Yushi was especially active tonight. After a round of making love, she leaned over to Li Zishuan's ear and whispered. Child, hearing this, Li Zishuan couldn't help but be startled. In his previous life, he was a human and had never been a father. In this life, it was the same. A father was a completely unfamiliar character to him, which made him somewhat stunned. No. Not yet. Wife, you are still too young. If you have a child now, it will harm your foundation and cause you to fall ill. A moment later, Li Zishuan came back to his senses. He firmly shook his head and said, Husband, this concubine is almost 16. I'm not young anymore. Han Yushi couldn't help but roll her eyes and say. Although Li Zishuan had patiently explained to her many times before on the issue of having a child, every time she saw a woman of her age whose child was now soy sauce, she felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. Li Jingma and Mrs. Li were kind people and had always treated her as their own daughter, so they had never mentioned this matter in front of her. They were afraid that she would have thoughts, but it was precisely because Father Li and Mrs. Li treated her like this that she should be even more grateful. Even if they didn't say it, Han Yushi could feel the 2 elders' obsession with holding a grandson. 16 years old? You're not young anymore? Li Zishuan couldn't help but roll his eyes. At this age, if it was in modern times, she would still be in high school, okay? Before dinner, did you hear what grandmother said? Li Zishuan pondered for a moment and asked. He was talking about the joke that old Madame Yi had said about letting Li Zishuan give birth to a grandson for Li Jingma as soon as possible. Han Yushi's beautiful eyes narrowed as she softly acknowledged. At that time, she originally came in to inform the several elders in the family to prepare for dinner. Coincidentally, she heard old Madame Ye's joke outside the door. Grandmother was just joking. Wife, you don't have to take it to heart. Li Zixuan patted Han Yushi's jade-like back and comforted her. Then, he said, don't be in a hurry to have children. When your body grows up and your physique becomes stronger, we'll consider having children. I don't want my wife to have a lifelong illness because of a child. It turns out that I am so important in my husband's heart. When Han Yushi heard this, she couldn't help but feel touched. In this era where the concept of there are 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants is the worst, was deeply rooted, most women were actually just tools for reproduction to men. A man like Li Zixuan who would rather have a child later than let his woman take the risk was really rare. However, it was precisely because Li Zixuan was so good to her that Han Yushi wanted to repay him even more. At this time, she pursed her lips, shook her head, and said softly, actually, the reason why I'm saying this isn't because of what grandmother said in the front hall today. It's because I really want to have a child. Husband will go to the military camp the day after tomorrow. I know my husband's character. If His Majesty wants my husband to go to the battlefield in the future, my husband will definitely not hesitate to put on his armor and go to the battlefield. I want to give birth to a child for my husband. This way, my husband will have one more concern and will do his best to protect himself. It had to be said that the person who understood Li Zixuan the most was actually the person who slept next to him. Although Li Zixuan said that he was only going to the military camp and not to the battlefield, Han Yushi knew in her heart that when the imperial court needed Li Zixuan to go to the battlefield one day, Li Zixuan would definitely go to the front line personally to kill the enemy. In the end, the words that Li Zixuan had comforted Li Jingmo and the others in the front hall could not deceive Han Yushi. Giving birth to a child was just to give you one more concern and to let you do your best to protect yourself. Hearing this, Li Zixuan couldn't help but feel his heart soften. He turned his head and gently kissed the forehead of the beauty in his arms. He sighed softly and said, "Wife, don't worry. With you, father, mother, and Lan your husband will not bear to die no matter what. Don't mention the matter of children again. Your body is still too weak now." Although she knew that Li Zixuan was concerned about her, Han Yushi still couldn't help but pout and say, "Husband, I am not as weak as those ladies from noble families. When I was young, I raised iron egg alone. Besides, I have been practicing the Taiji fist that you taught me before. Recently, I feel that my body is much better than before." "Wife, you are still persisting in practicing the Taiji fist?" Li Zixuan raised his eyebrows in astonishment. He had believed that Han Yushi had long forgotten about this matter. Of course. Pleased with herself, Han Yushi raised her chin and stated, "Previously, this concubine heard that the reason why Princess Changle's illness was cured was not only due to husband's superior medical skills, but also due to Princess Changle's constant practice of Taiji fist. How could this concubine dare to be lazy? Then let this husband see to what extent has wife practiced?" Somewhat curious, Li Zixuan pinched Han Yushi's wrist. A strand of soft Taoist zhenqi entered Han Yushi's body. Han Yushi felt a wave of warm energy flow through her limbs and bones. Afterwards, she heard Li Zixuan cry out in surprise. "Wife, you've actually managed to sense qi? Inconceivable! This is too inconceivable." That's right, Li Zixuan had discovered a strand of Taoist zhenqi in Han Yushi's dantian. Although that strand of Taoist zhenqi was very weak, it had been detected by Li Zixuan. How could Li Zixuan not be astonished? It must be known that there were millions upon millions of people in this world who wished to learn martial arts. However, those who were able to absorb qi into their bodies and cultivate zhenqi were less than 1 in 1,000. Who would have thought that it would be Changle and now Han Yushi? These two people had coincidentally managed to absorb qi into their bodies. This was truly too unimaginable. Could it be that these two women were both martial arts geniuses? Why had he not discovered this before? Li Zixuan muttered to himself. "Sense qi? Husband, what is sense chi? Although her husband was a martial arts grandmaster, Han Yushi knew nothing about martial arts. Hearing Li Zixuan's question, she was somewhat apprehensive and somewhat curious. It is Jinqi. Wife, your body now has a strand of Jinqi, the type of Jinqi that only martial artists possess. This is really rare. However, no matter what, this will only be beneficial to you. Wife, you don't have to worry about it. Li Zixuan paused and explained. Does that mean that this concubine's body is indeed much better than before? Han Yushi's eyes lit up as she hurriedly asked. She was not interested in the affairs of martial artists. She only wanted to know, yes. You can say that. Li Zixuan pinched his chin and nodded. Although this strand of Jinqi was extremely weak and Han Yushi did not know how to use it, it could imperceptibly improve a person's physique. Therefore, Han Yushi was indeed much healthier than ordinary women now. Han Yushi was delighted. She turned over and sat on Li Zixuan's body. With a face full of excitement, she said, Husband, does that mean we can have a child? Li Zixuan was speechless. It turned out that this woman was still thinking about this. All right, since there was no problem with her body and the other party was willing, what else could he say as a man? Ha. Since my wife wants to fight, then I am willing to risk my life to accompany her. Ha. Yes. It's time to get up. The next day, Li Zixuan, who had recently gotten used to waking up early, slept until the third quarter of the morning before waking up. Facing the dazzling sunlight outside the window, Li Zixuan rubbed his sleepy eyes and stretched lazily. However, he found that there was still a person lying on his arm. Recalling the several punitive expeditions and crazy entanglements last night, he rubbed his old waist with some lingering fear. He thought to himself that when this woman went crazy, even a martial arts master could not handle it. Yes. Han Yushi, who was sleeping, let out a very soft murmur and subconsciously tightened the quilt for herself. Li Zixuan smiled. He thought to himself that this woman must have been exhausted last night, right? Li Zixuan carefully pulled his arm out and then quietly got out of bed to put on his clothes. Although the warmth of the woman was intoxicating, he still had important matters to attend to today. He could not laze around in bed the whole day, could he? At this time, Li Jingma and the others had already eaten breakfast. However, it did not matter. The kitchen quickly served hot rice and hot dishes. Li Zixuan ate his breakfast hastily and left the house. What he did not know was that in the east courtyard of the Lord Protector's manor, there was a detective drama going on. How long did they last night? In reply to Madam, young master and young madam probably, until the middle of the night. Ah, the middle of the night? Isn't this too long? Old master, do you think little Xian might have overindulged and damaged his body? When Madame Li saw that Li Zixuan had left the house, she immediately called over Li Zixuan's personal maid, Xiao He, to secretly spy for information. Hearing Madame Li's words, Li Jingma's old face could not help but darken. As a parent, it was hard to say these things out of concern for their son and daughter-in-law. But now, the words that came out of Madame Li's mouth. What kind of words were these? Overindulgence, was this something a mother should say? It should be fine. Little Xian is after all a martial artist, and his physique is much stronger than ordinary people. Seeing that Li Jingma did not reply, Madame Li could not help but roll her eyes. Then, she justified herself and found an answer for herself. She then waved her hand at Xiao He and said, All right, Xiao He, you can leave. What I asked you today, you must not mention it to little Xian and Yushi, understand? Although Xiao He was thick-skinned, her cheeks were already flushed red. She hurriedly took her leave. Madam, don't worry. Xiao He will not tell anyone. Xiao He will take her leave. Madame Li nodded. After Xiao He left, she looked at Li Jingma with some excitement and said, Old master, it looks like little Xian has been enlightened. We will be able to hold a grandson soon. Li Jingma stroked his beard and scolded jokingly, this stinking brat. Although that was the case, it was difficult to conceal the smile between his brows. Chapter 1697. Hey, Brother Xing, why haven't you left yet? Yanhuang College's results are about to be released. That's not it. It's not even 4 minutes yet. Didn't they say that the results would be released at 9? It's true that the results will be released at 9, but there are so many people looking at the results today. If we don't go and get a spot in advance, I'm afraid that we won't even be able to squeeze into the academy later. Damn. Why didn't I think of this? I'm not eating anymore. Let's go quickly. After leaving the Marquis residence and walking on the cement road of the county, Li Zishuan could clearly feel a stream of people heading towards the Cloud Mountain outside the city. These people were basically all students participating in the Yanhuang College's entrance exam. Among the students who came for the exam, quite a number of them chose to stay in Lantian County. After all, compared to Chang'an City, this place was closer to Yanhuang College. Previously, some of them might have thought that the accommodations in Lantian County were inferior to those in Chang'an City. However, when they arrived in Lantian County, they realized that they were gravely mistaken. The wide and flat streets, the dazzling lineup of shops, and the clean and tidy inns. How was this a small county? It was completely comparable to a bustling city. This was especially true for the Dragon Gate in that had just been built in Lantian County. It was luxurious, imposing, and resplendent, stunning everyone. The living conditions inside could be said to be the best of all the inns in the Great Tang. Therefore, the students who were fortunate enough to stay in Longmen Inn could be said to be both physically and mentally happy these few days. After all, whether it was the accommodations or the distance to Yanhuang College, Longmen Inn had an absolute advantage over the other inns in Chang'an City. Lin Wenyuan could be said to have used the Yanhuang College's entrance exam as an opportunity to completely spread the name of the Lin family's Longmen Inn. After these students left Chang'an and returned to their respective hometowns, they would promote Lin Wenyuan's Longmen Inn for free. When Lin Wenyuan set up other branches of the inn in other places, he wouldn't have to worry about business at all. People would definitely swarm in to stay there. Li Zishuan sighed internally as he looked at the grand and imposing Dragon Gate Inn. Lin Wenyuan truly had a business acumen. After a moment, he shook his head and walked out of the city with Dabai. There were too many people in the city, so it was not easy for him to ride a horse. Along the way, Li Zishuan saw countless examinees walking in group. However, very few of them were chatting and laughing. Most of them had very serious expressions on their faces. This situation reminded Li Zishuan of when he was in elementary school in his previous world. He would go to school to get his report card after the end-of-term exams. He was nervous, but he also had some expectations. He hoped that he would perform better than usual and obtain good results. As someone who had experienced this before, Li Zishuan could understand this kind of contradictory mentality very well. After about 15 minutes, Li Zishuan and his horse finally arrived at the foot of Cloud Mountain. However, when he looked around, he was instantly dumbfounded. He saw that the long and winding path of Cloud Mountain was already packed with people. Among these people, there were examinees who had come to check their result. There were also parents and relatives who had accompanied the examinees to check their result. There were also some vendors selling snacks. These people really knew how to do business. They purposely went to places with a lot of people. This made the already narrow path of Cloud Mountain seem even more crowded. In addition, there were countless horse carriages parked at the foot of the mountain. Presumably, the wealthy young masters who came in horse carriages also understood that it was impossible to climb Cloud Mountain with horse carriages. Thus, they abandoned their horse carriages and walked up the mountain instead. Li Zishuan shook his head helplessly. Then, he turned around and patted Dabai's head. "Go into the forest and wait for me. After saying this, he didn't care whether Bai understood him or not. He put down the reins and walked toward the path of Cloud Mountain. This was the territory of Cloud Mountain. He wasn't worried at all that Bai would get lost or be stolen. Moreover, Bai's legs were very strong. If it really started running, no one would be able to catch it. On the mountain path, Li Zixuan slightly released a bit of his protective real qi. An invisible pushing force gently pushed the people around him away. Relying on this skillful force, Li Zixuan arrived at the top of the Cloud Mountain in a short while. He saw that the peak of the mountain was also filled with people. As it wasn't time to release the results yet, the gates of Yanhuang College weren't open yet. Otherwise, with so many examinees swarming in, it was hard to guarantee that there wouldn't be a single person causing trouble inside the college. For safety reasons, he could only wait until the time was almost up before the gates of the college opened. There were many college guards maintaining order at the gates. When they saw Li Zixuan, they hurriedly bowed and greeted, "Greetings, Yamacho. Mr. Yen and the others are all here, right?" Li Zixuan nodded and clasped his hands behind his back. Returning to Yamacho, "Mr. Yen and the others are all at Guanghua Tower." The college guard cupped his fists and said, Li Zixuan nodded and then said, "Maintain order well. Don't let them cause trouble." After saying that, he directly walked into the college. Naturally, someone would open the gates for him. "Yes, Yamacho," the guard replied loudly as he looked at Li Zixuan's back. The examinees surrounding the gates of the college suddenly became excited. "Wow! That person just now is the Yamacho from Yanhuang College?" The Yamacho from Yanhuang College is actually so young. That's right. He's much younger than the teachers in our county's official school. Also, the Yamacho from Yanhuang College is the current Marquis Yong, and he's already a marquis at such a young age. He's really a role model for our generation. These people were obviously examinees from other places. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so surprised to see Li Zixuan. "Dad, it's Grandmaster. He's entered the college." In a corner of the crowd, a young man stood on his tiptoes and said excitedly in the direction Li Zixuan left, don't talk nonsense. When did Marquis become your Grandmaster? Don't say such things to others in the future." Beside the young man stood an old man in luxurious clothes. Who else could it be other than Lin Wenyuan, who Li Zixuan was talking about in the county? The young man beside him was Lin Hao. The reason why he didn't allow Lin Hao to say that Li Zixuan was his grandmaster in front of outsiders was mainly because Lin Wenyuan didn't want to cause trouble for Li Zixuan because of this matter. Today, Lin Wenyuan came to look at the list with his son. Whether Lin Hao could enter Yanhuang College was very important to the Lin family. It could be said that the fate of the Lin family depended on Lin Hao to change it. In this era where the classes of scholars, farmers, and businessmen were strict, merchants were looked down upon the most. The children of merchants would face great obstacles even when they went to school, not to mention the imperial examinations. However, Yanhuang College didn't restrict the children of merchants. Moreover, anyone with foresight could see that the future of Yanhuang College was limitless. If one could enter Yanhuang College, their future achievements might not be inferior to taking the imperial examinations. Therefore, Lin Wenyuan was very anxious to know whether Lin Hao could make the list as soon as possible. Therefore, he personally came to Yunshan. "But Han Xiao is clearly—" "Oh yes, Dad." Lin Hao wanted to refute, but he was frightened by Lin Wenyuan's stern gaze. He quickly swallowed the words that were already at the tip of his tongue and changed his word. Only then did Lin Wenyuan's gaze become gentle. He murmured, "Soon. The list should be released in half an hour. Ancestors of the Lin family, please bless this kid. He must pass the exam." Lin Wenyuan was praying to the gods, but there were two slippery little fish in the crowd. They shuttled back and forth between the gaps of the crowd. They relied on their small bodies to quickly arrive at a position slightly in front of the crowd. Sister, you're still the smart one. If we didn't come early today, we might not even be able to reach Yunshan. The two little girls were wearing coarse clothes with many patches on their clothes. There were also a few spots of black ash on their faces. It was obvious that they were children from poor families. At this time, the younger girl sighed and said. The slightly older girl said, sigh. We still woke up too late. But it's already not easy to squeeze in here. Xiaoyu, when the academy opens later, you have to hold onto me tightly. Otherwise, if we get separated by the crowd, I won't be able to find you. These two little girls were the sisters Chen Shuazhen and Chen Shu. And, sister, don't worry. I'll definitely hold on to you tightly. This Yanhuang College is really imposing. Sister, do you think you'll get first place this time? If that's the case, Dad and Mom will definitely be overjoyed when they know about it. Chen Shuayu nodded and responded. At this time, she looked at the tall and majestic buildings within the walls of the academy and couldn't help but sigh. Because today was only the release of the results and not the exam, there was no need for a quiet environment and strict order. The academy didn't restrict the examinees from entering the mountain like a few days ago. Moreover, after the exam ended, all the examinees' tokens were taken back. At this time, even if they wanted to restrict it, it would be difficult to do so. Therefore, the examinees who weren't from Yanhuang College could also take this opportunity to see the majesty of Yanhuang College. Chen Shuazhen's eyes flashed. After a moment, she whispered inexplicably, Silly girl, how can I get first place? I only hope to get into the academy. She was talking about how to get first place, not how it was possible to get first place. This difference of one word meant 1,000 miles of difference in the meaning. However, Chen Shuayu was deeply shocked by the majestic building of Yanhuang Academy at this time and did not notice this small detail at all. But with her small brain, even if she noticed it, it would be difficult for her to understand in a short time. Dad, Mom, let's not push forward, there are too many people. In a while, when the people in front of us finish looking at the results, they will naturally come out. At that time, we'll go in and take a look. On the other side, Zhang Wenzhong also brought his parents to look at the results today. To be more precise, he was brought by Zhang Wenzhong's parents to look at the results. He originally wanted to come alone, but Zhang Wenzhong's parents couldn't wait at home and couldn't wait to come together. However, they came a little late. At this time, the release of the results was near, but they were still stuck on the mountain road halfway up the mountain. Zhang Wenzhong saw that his father wanted to cut in front of the line and quickly stopped him. Alas! Zhong'er, I'm just anxious. Zhang Wenzhong's father couldn't help but wipe his sweat and said. Zhang Wenzhong laughed and said, Dad, this is not your exam. Why are you anxious? What's more, now that the test papers have been marked, the results have been set. If the child passes the test, it means that he has passed. Don't tell me that if he's late, his name will fly off the list? Zhang Wenzhong's father was speechless. He had to admit that his son's words were very reasonable. Haha. Alright. Darling, you see that Zhong is not anxious. Why are you anxious? Let's line up slowly at the back. If we cut in line, it will be embarrassing to be seen by the guards of the academy who maintain order. Zhong still has to go to school in the future. Zhang Wenzhong's mother couldn't help but say at this time. She looked at her son's expression of victory and couldn't help but calm down. The door is open. The academy is open. The results are about to be released. Those in front, hurry up. At this time, there was a noise in front of the crowd. It was almost 9 o'clock. The academy was about to open the mountain gate and prepare to release the results. Chapter 1698. Everyone, line up and enter the academy in order to see the result. Do not push and shove. Those who violate the order and their relatives will be expelled from Yunshan and will never be allowed to step into Yanhuang College again. Everyone, line up and enter the academy in order to see the results. Do not push and shove. Those who violate the order and their relatives will be expelled from Yunshan and will never be allowed to step into Yanhuang College again. When it was close to 9, the gates of the academy opened. The examinees and their relatives who were crowding around the mountain peak and squeezing on the mountain path heard the news and moved immediately. There was a commotion in the crowd. After all, it was difficult to avoid conflicts when tens of thousands of people were squeezed together. At this moment, the guards of Yanhuang College and the Imperial Army guarding the foot of Yunshan all moved out. Each of them held a loudspeaker and shouted as they ran on both sides of the path. The voices of the guards of the Yanhuang Academy and the Imperial Guards at the foot of the Cloud Mountain were amplified by the loudspeakers and suddenly became abnormally loud and clear. Almost everyone heard this sentence. Therefore, the noisy and disorderly crowd suddenly quietened down. After all, to some of them, being expelled from the Cloud Mountain was not scary. What was scary was that the relatives of those who violated the order would never be able to take half a step into the Yanhuang Academy. Didn't this mean that even if their children were admitted to the Yanhuang Academy, they would be rejected by the Yanhuang Academy because of their squeezing and shoving today? This wasn't worth it at all. Therefore, the shouting of the guards of the academy and the Imperial Army had an immediate effect. The crowd outside the academy consciously lined up and walked towards the academy in order. Yamacho's idea is still the best. This way, we won't have to worry about these people getting hurt because of the pushing and shoving. Yen Silu and Li Zixuan stood by the window of the corridor on the 4th floor of Guanghua Building and looked down. Yen Silu couldn't help but sigh when he saw that the crowd outside the academy had suddenly become orderly. Li Zixuan frowned and said, "The academy has not considered this aspect thoroughly. Today, tens of thousands of people have come to look at the result. Although the Cloud Mountain is not very steep, the academy is located at the peak of the Cloud Mountain. It is a small mountain. If so many people suddenly come here, it will be easy to cause trouble, especially the mountain path of the Cloud Mountain. Although it has been widened several times, if these people are in a mess, they will still be easily pushed down the cliff. If that happens and someone dies, our academy will be in trouble." He had squeezed his way up from the foot of the mountain and knew the situation of the crowd outside the academy like the back of his hand. It was precisely because of this understanding that he realized the seriousness of the problem. The first thing he did when he arrived at the academy was to order the academy guards to take out a batch of loudspeakers. Together with the Imperial Guards stationed at the foot of the mountain, they immediately maintained order on both sides of the mountain path. As someone who had transmigrated from the modern world, Li Zixuan knew better than anyone else how serious the situation would be if a large group of people panicked and trampled. Therefore, he had to take precautions. Today was a good day for Yanhuang College to release the result. He couldn't allow this good day to become a bad day. This old man did not consider this thoroughly. "Please punish me, Yamacho." Hearing this, a trace of guilt flashed across Yen Silu's face. Then, he cupped his hands and apologized to Li Zixuan. "No, I don't mean to blame Mr. Kong Gue." Li Zixuan hurriedly waved his hand and said seriously, "The scale of the Academy's entrance examination this time is far greater than last year's. The number of applicants alone is more than 3 times of last year's. Under such circumstances, the entire Academy is overloaded, including the previous few days when the Academy teachers were marking the papers together. Everyone has worked hard. As for you, Mr. Kong Gue, you're in charge of the overall situation. You've worked harder than anyone else. Under such a pressing situation, it's completely understandable that you didn't consider this point. It's me, the Mountain Chief, who has done too little." Chapter 1699. How quick. I'll search from the back to the middle. You search from the middle to the front. Quickly see if you can find your name. Lin Wenwen's father was also nervous at this time. It was as if he was the one taking the exam instead of Lin Hao. Dad, why do we have to search from the back to the front? Can't we search from the front to the back? However, his words hurt Lin Hao a little. Did his father look down on him that much? Hey, you brat. Don't tell me you still think your name can be ranked at the front? I just want to find your name as soon as possible. Hearing that, Lin Wenyuan could not help but smack the back of Lin Hao's head as he said in annoyance. He had fantasized that his son could get first place or top 10, but that was just a fantasy. How could it become reality? To be honest, Lin Hao went from being an ignorant rich kid to being taught by Iron Egg to learning engineering knowledge. It had only been 6 or 7 months. How could he get a good result in the entrance exam of Yanhuang College, where there were so many experts? Lin Wenyuan thought that as long as Lin Hao could get into the college, he would be satisfied even if he was last on the list. Lin Wenyuan, who had been in the business world for many years, was very realistic when looking at problems. Dad. I found my name. 228th, a total of 82 points. Dad, look. Just when Lin Wenyuan was looking at the bottom of the list, Lin Hao suddenly exclaimed and said excitedly, "What?" Lin Wenyuan's body suddenly shook. He suspected that he had heard wrong, so he couldn't help but say, 228th? However, you said you were 228th? Where is it? Let me see. After that, Lin Wenyuan quickly opened his eyes wide and desperately looked for the 228th name on the list. Fortunately, although Lin Wenyuan didn't want to get into Yanhuang College, he still taught himself a little of the college's new mathematics in his spare time. After all, the new mathematics was very helpful for business, so Lin Wenyuan also recognized the Arabic numerals on the list. Soon, he found Lin Hao's name behind the number 228. 228th, Lin Hao, a weighted total of 82 points. Seeing this small line of words, Lin Wenyuan had the urge to laugh out loud. However, he didn't know why. When he was extremely happy, he couldn't laugh, and he even had tears in his eyes. It's true. It's actually true. Hao really got into Yanhuang College, and his score is in the top. The ancestors of the Lin family bless and protect him. Lin Wenyuan excitedly patted Lin Hao's shoulder with both hands, and then said incoherently, Father, I told you long ago, this time's entrance exam, your son is in the bag. At that time, you and Mother didn't believe me, but now you should believe me, right? Lin Hao took the opportunity to show off. I believe you, I believe you. Looks like your mother and father didn't have good eyesight before. Unexpectedly, this time, Lin Wenyuan didn't attack Lin Hao's weak spirit with words as usual. Instead, he went along with Lin Hao's words and praised him. This made Lin Hao stunned, and he couldn't help but feel flattered. Father, are you alright? Don't tell me you have a fever? Get lost! Lin Wenyuan reacted at this time, and his old face couldn't help but darken as he roared angrily. He thought to himself, can't you be nice to this brat? That's normal. Lin Hao wasn't angry. Instead, he breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, Father, this time, your son got into Yanhuang College as you wished. Shouldn't you give me some reward? Lin Wenyuan said with a straight face, What reward do you want? Lin Hao thought for a while and said with a serious face, There are still 2 months before the academy starts. In these 2 months, your son wants to finish all the novels that I didn't have time to read before. Father, you and Mother can't interfere with me during this time. Lin Wenyuan glared and couldn't help but feel a little angry. He thought that Lin Hao wanted to use this as an excuse to ask for some money, but he didn't expect that this stinking brat actually made such a ridiculous request. He was really useless. Sigh. Forget it, forget it. We'll do as you wish. In these 2 months, your mother and father won't interfere with anything you do. In the end, Lin Wenyuan nodded and agreed to Lin Hao's request. Haha. Thank you, father. Then, your son will go back now. Lin Hao laughed loudly, turned around, and ran away. In a short while, he was nowhere to be seen. This brat, he doesn't have any ambition at all. Lin Wenyuan looked in the direction that Lin Hao left, and then he walked out of the crowd. No matter what, my Lin family will have a scholar this time. Let's see who dares to look down on this old man in the future. Although he was a little disappointed, Lin Wenyuan was still very satisfied with Lin Hao's results this time. He clasped his hands behind his back and squeezed out of the crowd while thinking proudly in his heart. Sister, why didn't I find your name at the front? In contrast to Lin Wenyuan, on the other side, a little girl started to search from the first place on the list. However, after searching for more than 10 names, she still couldn't find the name she was looking for. She turned her head and was puzzled. This little girl was Chen Shuoyu. At this time, she and Chen Shuozhen were in the 3rd row of the crowd. Although they were shorter than the people around them, fortunately, the Academy's red list was hung very high. As long as they looked up, they could still see the words on it. Who said that sister must be at the front? Xiaoyu, look at the 33rd row. Isn't that your sister's name? Chen Shuozhen couldn't help but smile when she heard this. She rubbed Chen Shuoyu's head and smiled. Ah, it's true. Chen Shuoyu looked at the 33rd row and was stunned when she saw it. She said in disbelief, Sister, why are you only 33rd? Only 33rd. If these words were heard by others, they would be depressed to the point of vomiting blood. However, Chen Shuoyu knew that her sister got the test papers in advance and went to find people to get the answers in advance. According to common sense, Chen Shuozhen shouldn't be able to get first place, but she should be able to get into the top 10. However, what Chen Shuoyu didn't expect was that Chen Shuozhen only got 33rd. This was really inconceivable. When you grow up, you will understand why your sister only got 33rd. Chen Shuozhen glanced at her right front and said meaningfully. Then she pulled Chen Shuoyu's arm and said, Okay, let's go home. No matter what, your sister got into Yanwang College. Let's go home and celebrate. Hearing the word celebrate, Chen Shuoyu quickly nodded. The 2 sisters quickly walked out of the crowd. However, in the direction that Chen Shuozhen was looking at, there was a middle-aged man in green who was looking at the red list. He looked from top to bottom and whispered to himself, Strange. There is no one named Chen Wenying in the top 10. Could it be that Master is lying to us? This person was the apprentice of the Hanging Pot Hall, Chang Feng. Previously, when Chen Shuozhen went to the Hanging Pot Hall, she met him. He was also the one who introduced Chen Shuozhen to Lin Jichang. Yesterday, Lin Jichang accidentally found out that the entrance examination questions of Yanwang Academy's medical school were exactly the same as the questions that Chen Wenying, Chen Shuozhen, had asked him. Out of curiosity, he sent Chang Feng over to see if Chen Wenying was the top student this time. At the same time, he also wanted to see who exactly Chen Wenying was to be able to obtain the entrance examination questions of Yanwang Academy in advance. However, the result was destined to disappoint Lin Jichang. The top student of the medical school wasn't Chen Wenying. Her surname wasn't even Chen. Chang Feng didn't even see Chen Wenying at the scene. This made Chang Feng wonder if Lin Jichang was lying to him. It seems that the old man from the Hanging Pot Hall has found out the secret of the questions. He actually sent people from the medical hall to investigate. Luckily, I was prepared. Not only is my name fake, but I didn't get first place because I purposely answered the last 2 questions wrong. More importantly, I'm wearing tattered clothes today. Unless Chang Feng comes close, he definitely won't be able to recognize me and Xiao Yu. Chen Shuozhen, who was walking down the mountain with her little sister, couldn't help but think proudly. In fact, from the moment she decided to go to the hanging pot hall to get the answers, she was prepared to take precautions. She couldn't let Lin Jichang know her true identity. She also couldn't let anyone other than Lin Jichang know that the 10 questions she said that day were all questions for the Yanhuang College's medical school's admission exam. This way, as long as Lin Jichang couldn't find her, he couldn't take her down and confront her face to face. He wouldn't have any way to prove that she cheated. Without any evidence, without any foundation, and with this matter related to Yanhuang College's reputation, Chen Shuozhen believed that Lin Jichang wouldn't have the guts to publicize this matter before he was 100% sure. As a small fry, if she wanted to live longer, she had to be careful. Chen Shuozhen understood this point very well. This was the caution of a small fry, and also the wisdom that a small fry needed to survive. But the person who got first place in the medical school actually got full marks? Who is so good? Also, this name sounds familiar. Could it be that Marquis not only gave the exam to me in advance, but also leaked it to him in advance? After being proud for a while, Chen Shuozhen's heart also had a trace of doubt. She was very clear about the difficulty of the medical school exam. She didn't think that anyone could get full marks without cheating. If there was, then this person must be a monster. After all, at such a young age, having such high medical skills, if he wasn't a monster, what else could he be? Chapter 1700. Oh my God! Someone actually got full marks in the medical school this time? What? Full marks? Were the medical school's exam questions this year so easy? Bullsh *t. How could it be so easy? I heard that after the exam 2 days ago, someone wrote down the exam questions from memory and showed them to a doctor in Chang'an. Even the doctor wasn't very sure about a few questions. Do you think the exam questions this time were easy or difficult? Even the doctor in charge of the medical school couldn't answer them? Then the medical school's exam questions this time were too difficult? Of course. I heard that the medical school's exam questions were personally organized by Dr. Sunday. Of course, ordinary doctors wouldn't be able to answer them. Damn. According to what you said, shouldn't the medical school's examinees have done very badly? How could there be someone who got full marks? How would I know? It seems that the medical school has recruited a medical genius this time. Let's go. Let's go and see who the person who got full marks is. Lin Hao, Lin Wenyuan, Chen Shuozhen, and Chen Shuoyu left, but the commotion on Yunshan Mountain did not stop there. Instead, as time passed, more and more people knew that the medical school had a top scorer who got full marks. Even the examinees who were looking at the results at the Eastern Institute of Technology couldn't help but shift their focus when they heard the news. They came over to see who the student who got full marks was. In an instant, the medical school's results list, which was originally quite relaxed, suddenly became crowded. Zhang Wenzhong? Who is this Zhang Wenzhong? He actually got full marks? Unbelievable! It's too unbelievable! If that's the case, isn't this Zhang Wenzhong's medical skills already on par with some of the doctors in the medical school? I wonder how old this guy is. He actually has such amazing medical skills. Soon, more and more people noticed the name list of the medical school's top student. Looking at the name on top of everyone's head, most of the students couldn't even feel jealous because the gap between them was too big. First place, Zhang Wenzhong, 100 points. Second place, Cui Shirong, 90 points. There was a gap of 10 points between the first and second place. One must know that this wasn't a gap of 10 points in a single subject. This was a weighted average score. It was obviously more difficult to create a gap of 10 points in this area. Therefore, that dazzling 100 points directly made people unable to feel jealous. Everyone understood that they really couldn't be jealous of this score. Even if they were given another 10 chances, none of them had absolute confidence that they would be able to get full marks. Did you hear? There's someone who got full marks. What? Full marks? That's amazing. Who is it? According to the people in front, that person seems to be called Zhang Wenzhong. Zhang Wenzhong. Who is this person? Why haven't I heard of him before? Sigh. Not only you, I. As time passed, the people who had finished looking at the results began to leave the academy. Today, the academy was only open to the public in front of the Guanghua building. The other places were guarded by guards and no one was allowed to get close. Therefore, those who had finished looking at the results could only leave the academy. Those who were queuing outside were able to move forward and slowly approach the academy's mountain gate. As those who had finished looking at the list left, the news of someone scoring full marks in the Academy of Medical Sciences gradually spread through the queue. Soon, almost everyone in the queue knew of this shocking news. Zhong, did you hear that? Are you the one who scored full marks? In the crowd, Father Zhang and Mother Zhang were still queuing outside the academy. From time to time, they could hear the people around them talking about a student who scored full marks in the Academy of Medical Sciences. At this moment, he finally couldn't help but tug at Zhang Wenzhong beside him and ask in a trembling voice. At this moment, Father Zhang was both nervous and excited. Even his voice had a slight tremor in it. Mother Zhang immediately looked at Zhang Wenzhong with eager eyes. At this moment, she really hoped that the student who scored full marks in the Academy of Medical Sciences was her son. It should be. But there are thousands of students taking the exam this time, and they are all from different counties in the Tang Empire. It's inevitable that there will be people with the same name. Zhang Wenzhong thought about it and said cautiously. When Father Zhang heard this, he was overjoyed at first, but then he was stunned because the latter half of Zhang Wenzhong's sentence made sense. Hence, he asked nervously, Zhong, how do you think you did in the exam this time? Zhang Wenzhong smiled and said, Father, didn't I tell you this before? Don't worry. Even if I don't get first place, I won't do too badly. I'm still very confident in this exam. Besides, whether I'm first or not, we can just walk closer to see later. Every candidate has an exam number. With the help of the exam number, even if there are people with the same name, there won't be any confusion. There were 6,000 to 7,000 students taking the entrance exam for Yanhuang College this time, and the final admission number was more than 1,000. It was inevitable that there would be people with the same name. Hence, Zhang Wenzhong guessed that the academy would definitely use other methods to distinguish between people with the same name. In fact, this was indeed the case. Behind every name on the list of results was a row of Arabic numerals. This row of numbers was the student's exam number. Yes. There's an exam number too. That's good. Zhang Wenzhong's father patted his head. Then, he looked at the dense crowd in front of him and said dejectedly, Sigh. There are so many people. I don't know when it'll be our turn to enter. Father, don't worry. There are already a lot fewer people in front of us. I estimate that we'll be able to enter the academy in 3/4 of an hour. Although Zhang Wenzhong was also very eager to see if he was the one at the top of the list, he didn't show it. Instead, he calmly comforted his father. 3/4 of an hour? Sigh. We can only wait. However, for Zhang Wenzhong's father, he couldn't even wait for 3 blinks of an eye, let alone 3/4 of an hour. But what could he do if he couldn't wait? Could it be that he could cut the queue? Looking at the two sides of the line, the Yanhuang College guards were eyeing covetously. Then, he recalled that a few people had already been expelled from Yunshan by the guards for cutting the line. Zhang Wenzhong's father shrunk his neck and decisively dismissed the idea of cutting the line. It didn't matter if he was expelled from Yunshan. The key was that it would affect Zhang Wenzhong's future. This was something that Zhang Wenzhong's father absolutely didn't want to see. Zhang Wenzhong's father didn't know how many 3/4 of an hour he had experienced in the first half of his life. However, the current 3/4 of an hour felt so long to him. Under the entanglement of nervous, excited, anxious, conflicted, worried, and other complex emotions, Zhang Wenzhong's father finally endured the 3/4 of an hour. We're in. We're finally in. In order to prevent a large number of people from suddenly rushing in and causing a stampede, the Academy adopted the strategy of entering in batches. After the first batch of people left, the next batch of people would enter. Of course, each batch of people could only stay in the Academy for a limited time. When the time was up, they had to leave. This was a bit like the upper limit strategy used by some subway stations during the morning rush hour. At this time, almost 3/4 of an hour had passed. The Zhang family of 3 finally entered the Academy. Zhang Wenzhong's father couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. There was a trace of joy on his face, but there was also a trace of worry. The medical college's results list is on the west side. Following the guidance of the Academy's guard, Zhang Wenzhong's father quickly brought Zhang Wenzhong and Zhang Wenzhong's mother to the medical college's results list. They were faster, so they managed to grab the 3rd-row position. It was not bad as they could see the words on the red list clearly. First place, Zhang Wenzhong, exam number 06280913, score 100 points. Zhang Wenzhong's father was literate. He raised his head and went straight to the top of the list. Immediately, he saw his son's name. He couldn't help but tug at Zhang Wenzhong's arm and said excitedly, "Zhong, quickly take a look and see if this exam number is yours." Zhang Wenzhong didn't say anything. He raised his head and quietly looked at his high and mighty name on the red list. It was at the top of the list, far ahead of the 2nd place. This result was a recognition of his devotion to medicine, his diligent study of medicine, and his previous master's treatment of patients. Of course, this was also a reward for his parents' silent support for his medical studies all these years. "Zhong, what's wrong? Is this exam number not yours?" Zhang Wenzhong's father's expression suddenly changed when he saw that Zhang Wenzhong didn't speak for a long time. "Dad, Mom, this exam number is mine. I got into Yanhuang College." Zhang Wenzhong retracted his gaze and looked at his parents with tears in his eyes. He said firmly, "Haha, good, good, good. My son got into the Yanhuang Academy, and he even got 1st place. Ha." Zhang Wenzhong's father heard this and his nervous mood suddenly turned into ecstasy. He raised his head and laughed loudly. Such a big commotion naturally attracted the attention of the surrounding people. The crowd in front of the medical college's results list immediately turned their attention to this side. "Look, that person is the top of the medical college's exam this time. He got full marks." The crowd automatically ignored Zhang Wenzhong's father and looked at the young man next to him. According to the age limit of the college's enrollment, that young man could be the medical college's candidate this time. Oh my God! So young? How did he get full marks? Could it be that he started studying medicine when he was in his mother's womb? This is incredible! The medical college's enrollment exam questions not only require theoretical knowledge, but also practical medical experience. Could it be that he has treated patients at such a young age? I know him. A few days ago, the Tang Alliance Medical Center in Lantian County treated a young man with intestinal abscess. Marquis, Dr. Sun, and Taoist Xian Qing from the Celestial Master sect of Longhu Mountain treated him together and finally pulled him back from the jaws of death. If I remember correctly, that young man's name is Zhang Wenzhong. What? How could there be such a coincidence? Marquis, you've saved a medical genius from the Yanhuang Academy. Soon, someone recognized Zhang Wenzhong, but Zhang Wenzhong didn't care about the outsider's comment. He cupped his hands to the surrounding candidates and then turned to leave with his parent. "Dad, Mom, my life was saved by Marquis. Oh, it should be Yamacho. I will use this life to save more people in the future to repay Yamacho for saving my life." When they reached the foot of Cloud Mountain, Zhang Wenzhong suddenly stopped and turned to look at his parents. He said in an unusually serious tone. Father Zhang and Mother Zhang couldn't help but be startled. After being stunned for a moment, Father Zhang opened his mouth and said, "Zhong, you're right. One must know how to repay kindness. The Marquis saved your life, so all the more you should work hard to repay him. However, Marquis doesn't lack money or reputation. Now that you are a student of Yanhuang College, you are his disciple. As the saying goes, a teacher for a day is a father for life. You must listen to Marquis in the future and fulfill your responsibility as a disciple by Marquis's side." Zhang Wenzhong nodded solemnly and said, "I will remember Father's teachings." "Ha! That's enough. Let's go home. Zhong, I will make your favorite dishes when we get back home to celebrate the top of the exam." Zhang Wenzhong's mother laughed. Yes. Thank you, Mom." Chapter 1701. Who would have thought that Zhang Wenzhong would be able to get full marks? Looks like I've still underestimated him. Li Zixuan couldn't help but sigh as he watched the bustling crowd in the Academy's Guanghua building. Previously, when Yen Silu told him the name of the person who got full marks in the medical school, he was a little nervous because he was afraid that Yen Silu's name would be Chen Shuazhen. If that happened, he would have to cover up countless lies later on. However, although the person who got full marks wasn't Chen Shuazhen, Li Zixuan was still a little surprised when he heard the name Zhang Wenzhong. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Zhang Wenzhong's ability. Zhang Wenzhong's medical skills were unquestionable since he was able to leave his name in history. However, he should only be 7 or 8 years old now, right? What could a 7 or 8-year-old do in modern times? He probably only knew how to play mobile phones and games. However, Zhang Wenzhong's medical skills were already comparable to a doctor in a medical hall when he was only 7 or 8 years old. It was really unbelievable. Are all the children in ancient times so monstrous? First, there was Jiao Jiayin, Li Yan, Li Ku, Li Tai, and now there's Zhang Wenzhong. Yanhuang College is getting more and more monstrous. Li Zixuan couldn't help but sigh in his heart. At this moment, he was really glad that he had saved Zhang Wenzhong's life in the medical hall that day. He didn't just save the life of a young boy, he might have saved the lives of hundreds and thousands of people. Now that Zhang Wenzhong was admitted into Yanhuang College, under the guidance of experts like Sun Simiao, Dr. Qin, Dr. Wang, and Gu Qinyue, and under the influence of the Academy's modern medical theories, Li Zixuan believed that Zhang Wenzhong's future medical skills would be much higher than the original Zhang Wenzhong in history. At that time, he alone would be able to save countless lives. He might very well become the second Sun Simiao of Tang Dynasty. Shaking his head, Li Zixuan shook off the chaotic thoughts in his mind and left the academy. After descending the Cloud Mountain, he found a bai in a small forest. Then, man and horse headed straight for Chang'an City. All the talents in the world will enter Yanhuang College. Although this was just a slogan and Li Zixuan's beautiful vision for the future of the college, this vision was slowly being realized. The number of students that Yanhuang College could recruit was increasing, and the number of talents it could attract was also increasing. Among them, there was no lack of intelligent and stunning geniuses. They would support the future glory of the college. The academy was developing in a better direction, so Li Zixuan had to fight for a stable and safe environment for the academy. Your Majesty, His Highness the King of Shu requests an audience. In the Sweet Dew Hall, Li Er had just finished his morning court session and was sitting on the dragon couch. He did not even bother to drink a cup of immortal tea. At this moment, Zhao Song walked in and bowed to Li Er. Kerr is back? Li Er raised his eyebrows in surprise. Zhao Song hurriedly replied, Your Majesty, His Highness the King of Shu had returned to the city last night. However, it was already late, so His Highness did not enter the palace to disturb the Emperor. A few months ago, Li Ku was conferred the title of King of Shu and was in charge of military and government affairs in all the states of Jiannan. This was also the official establishment of a prince's residence. Since then, Li Ku had moved out of the palace. However, he usually stayed at Yanhuang College and did not return to Chang'an. He had only stayed in this residence outside the palace a few times. Li Er nodded and said, "Let him in." "Yes." Zhao Song responded and turned to leave. "Greetings, father." Not long after, Li Ku walked in from outside the hall and bowed to Li Er. "You may rise, Ku'er." Li Er waved his hand and then looked at Li Ku for a while. He smiled and said, "You've become more mature. You haven't returned to the palace for a long time. Have you paid your respects to your mother?" Li Ku cupped his hands and replied, "Father, before this, I have already paid my respects to my mother." Li Ku's birth mother was imperial concubine Yang, and the head of the Tang Empire's imperial harem was Zhang Sun Wugo. In this palace, etiquette was the most important thing. Even if imperial concubine Yang was Li Ku's birth mother, he had to pay his respects to Empress Zhangsun before he could go to his birth mother. Therefore, Li Ku's words were very appropriate. Li Er nodded in satisfaction and then asked, "Good. Ku'er, what brings you here today?" Li Ku had already prepared a draft before he came. He took a step forward and bowed to Li Er. "Father Emperor, a few days ago, this son followed the mountain elders to the north to exterminate the locusts. I have seen too many hardships of the people. Although most of these hardships were caused by natural disasters, there were also man-made disasters. In this extermination of the locusts, there were corrupt officials and unscrupulous merchants who tried to hoard and drive up the price of food. The corrupt officials and the evil grain merchants will be dealt with by the imperial censors sent by Father. However, I have also discovered that some of the shopkeepers of the Yanhuang Bank's branches are taking the opportunity to stir up trouble in the dark. Jin Wanfu, the shopkeeper of Yanhuang Bank in Xinfeng County, is a typical example. Other than him, during the journey to the north, Iron Mountain Head found out that there were a total of 12 branches of the bank that were secretly involved in illegal activities. When we returned to the capital, I learned from Mountain Head that the Dragon Sect had previously rebelled and was fortunately executed in front of Chang'an City. However, behind the Dragon Sect, there were also 8 shopkeepers of the bank who were using their official position for personal gain, secretly sending money to the Dragon Sect. The Yanhuang Bank was in charge of the distribution of the Tang Yuan and also controlled the deposits and loans of the people. It could be said that it was a vital department that was related to the fate of the Tang Empire. The appearance of a parasite like Jin Wanfu was a serious blow to the reputation of the Yanhuang Bank among the people. Fortunately, the Yamacho used a thunderous method to resolve the trust crisis of the Yanhuang Bank. However, who can guarantee that the Yanhuang Bank will not be corrupted in the future? You must know that a place like the bank is the most prone to corruption. Li Er narrowed his eyes and asked in a deep voice, "Ku'er, what do you think?" Although he was mentally prepared, Li Ku was still a little nervous. Because it involved military matters, he was likely to be suspected by his father, who had taken the throne because of the coup. Forcing himself to calm down, Li Ku's face turned solemn. He bowed again and said, "Father, I intend to establish a new department in the Yanhuang Bank called the Gold-Clad Guard. It will specialize in correcting illegal activities within the bank to ensure that the bank will always operate normally. I sincerely ask for Father's permission." The hall suddenly fell into a deathly silence. Li Er's tiger-like eyes suddenly flashed. After a long silence, Li Er calmly said, "Oh, Gold-Clad Guard? Ku'er, can you tell me in detail?" Chapter 1702. In the Ganlu Hall. Under the watchful gaze of Li Er, Li Ku braced himself and explained the overall structure of the golden-clothed guards of the Yanhuang Bank. Father, the Golden Cloved Guards will be responsible for monitoring the various branches of the Yanhuang Bank in the Great Tang Empire and preventing internal members from accepting bribes and corruption. They will also ensure the safety of the Yanhuang Bank in its daily operations and prevent criminals from coveting the wealth of the bank. Therefore, the Golden Cloved Guards will not only have clerical personnel who are good at investigating and analyzing accounts, but they will also have military personnel who are good at arresting criminals and fighting. This department will be a department that is well versed in both civil and military matters and will do its best to ensure the normal and healthy operations of the bank. I believe that Father knows the importance of the bank to the Great Tang Empire, even if I don't say it. Therefore, I implore Father to support me in establishing the Golden Cloved Guards. After saying that, Li Ku bowed deeply and didn't dare to raise his head for a long time. This matter was too important. He didn't know if Li Er would agree or not, let alone what choice Li Er would make. The hall fell into a deathly silence once again. Li Er narrowed his eyes. At this moment, his mind was racing. As an emperor who had risen to the throne through a coup, Li Er had always been extremely sensitive to the military and military matters. Take Li Chengqian for example. Even though Li Chengqian was the heir to the throne of the Great Tang Empire, other than the few hundred guards in the East Palace, Li Chengqian didn't have any military forces in his hands. He didn't even have the 6 squads of the Crown Prince. It was just a thing in name only. Among Li Er's sons, none of them had the military power of more than 1,000 people. As someone who had been through this before, Li Er knew very well that with an army in hand, one's ambition would be bred and one would have the capital to fight for the throne. The heavenly policy residence that he had led back then was his capital to rule the world today. And now, Li Ku was requesting him to establish the Golden Cloved Guards. Although the jurisdiction of the Golden Cloved Guards was only the Yanhuang Bank, there were so many branches of the bank in the world. If the Golden Cloved Guards were established, the number of military personnel would definitely not be small. Was Li Er doing this for justice or for personal reasons? On the other hand, Li Ku was the first prince to propose to Li Er. However, Li Ku's identity was too sensitive. He had the royal blood of the Great Tang Empire and the Sui Dynasty. He wasn't the heir, but the nobility of his bloodline was no less than Li Chengqian. If he agreed to establish the Golden Cloved Guards, it would be hard to guarantee that the others in the court wouldn't have improper thoughts. In this short span of time, many thoughts flashed through Li Er's mind. Finally, Li Er opened his mouth and said, "Kurr, the matter of the gold-robed guards, did you think of it yourself, or did someone mention it to you? Tell Father the truth." Hearing Li Er finally speak, Li Ku couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He clasped his hands and said, "I don't dare to lie to Father. The Golden Cloved Guards came about when the Yamacho went up north to exterminate the locusts and saw the serious corruption within the Yanhuang Bank in Xinfeng County. That's why they had the idea of establishing the Golden Cloved Guards. The Yamacho said that the Yanhuang Bank was related to the economic lifeline of the Great Tang Empire. Its importance was definitely not inferior to any of the 6 ministries of the imperial court. If the internal operations of the bank couldn't be normal and healthy, and if the corruption reached the root, not only would the bank be finished, but the Great Tang Empire would also be in danger. Li Zishuan? It's really him. Li Er's eyes narrowed as he muttered to himself. He was silent for a long time before he spoke again. Then have you thought about how many military personnel there would be in the Golden Clothed Guards? How many civilian personnel would there be? Li Ku was already prepared for this. He replied without hesitation, replying to Father, "The Great Tang Empire currently has more than 300 provinces and 1,500 counties. However, not every county has a branch of the Yanhuang Bank. According to the internal records of the Yanhuang Bank, there are a total of 512 branches of the bank in the entire Great Tang Empire. If the Golden Clothed Guards want to cover all the branches of the bank, They would need at least 600 civilian personnel and 2,000 military personnel. At that time, the Golden Clothed Guards will set up the State Guard Station in each province and the Dao Guard Station in each province. Each guard station will conduct security and irregular audits of the accounts of the banks under their jurisdiction. If they discover any corruption, they will immediately report it to the higher levels. First, the internal affairs of the bank will be dealt with. After that, the relevant criminals will be handed over to the local government or the Supreme Court. Even though Li Er was mentally prepared, he was still shocked by Li Ke's grand plan. More than 600 civilian staff and more than 2,000 military staff. What was Li Ke trying to do? He was going to establish a national yamen. Thinking back to when he was still the king of Qin, the Heavenly Policy residence only had 2,000 to 3,000 civil and military personnel. Could it be that Li Ke wanted to use this opportunity to touch the position of the crown prince? At this moment, Li Er couldn't help but suspect that Li Ke had selfish motives. Seeing that Li Er didn't speak, Li Ke's heart jumped to his throat. He actually knew that his request was a bit too much. However, the Yanhuang Bank stall was too big. If there were too few people, they definitely wouldn't be able to take care of such a big stall. 600 civilian personnel and 2,000 military personnel. This was already considered a small number. When the Golden Clothed Guards were fully established, the total number of personnel would definitely far exceed this scale. Although this might cause Li Er to be suspicious, Li Ke had a clear conscience. He didn't have any improper thoughts about the position of the crown prince. He only wanted to manage the Yanhuang Bank well. He realized that he had already fallen in love with the job of managing money. Therefore, although the atmosphere in the hall was becoming more and more serious, although Li Ke was also a little afraid of Li Er's might, he still straightened his back and looked at the top of the hall without changing his expression. This was because he had a clear conscience. Perhaps it was because of this clear conscience gaze that moved Li Er. Li Er looked at Li Ke for a moment and then said, "Ha ha! 600 civilian staff and 2,000 military staff." Ke was truly a bold man. The Yanhuang Bank is in charge of the issuance of the Tang Dynasty's currency and the savings and loans of the common people. It is indeed important. As for the personnel of the bank, they come into contact with large amounts of money every day. It is indeed easy for them to have thoughts of corruption. Your suggestion to establish the Golden Clothed Guards is very good. Unexpectedly, the moment Li Er opened his mouth, he actually confirmed Li Ke's idea. Li Ke, who was prepared to receive a storm from Li Er, couldn't help but be stunned. What he didn't expect was Li Er's next sentence. Li Er paused for a moment and continued, "Since that is the case, then Ke, you will be in charge of establishing the Golden Clothed Guards. The number of civilian and military personnel will be handled according to what you said earlier. All the manpower and resources needed, I will fully cooperate with you." Chapter 1703. Within the Ganlu Palace, a yamen of more than 2,000 people had been built just like that, and it had even been given to a prince. Before this, no one would have believed that the wise and mighty Emperor Li Er would make such a foolish decision. Li Ke's mouth was agape in shock. Li Er had agreed too quickly and decisively, so much so that he almost couldn't believe that the person in front of him was Li Er. While Li Ke was still in a daze, Li Er spoke once more. In addition, since the Yanhuang Bank is affiliated with the Ministry of Revenue, the establishment of the Gold Clothed Guard cannot be done without the support of the Ministry of Revenue. We will issue a decree for Xiao Yu to cooperate with you in establishing the civil staff of the Gold Clothed Guard. They will be responsible for checking the accounts of the bank. As for the military staff of the Gold Clothed Guard, Li Er paused for a moment, his brow creasing as if he was seriously considering something. After a few moments, he chuckled. Ke, although you've been practicing martial arts since you were young, you've never led soldiers before. If you rashly establish a military staff of more than 2,000 people, I'm afraid that your strength will be insufficient. How about we send someone to assist you? Send someone to assist? Li Ku suddenly had a conjecture. Could it be that Li Erma was recommending Li Junxian to him? Your son thanks Imperial Father. Although many thoughts were running through his mind, Li Ku did his best to maintain a normal expression as he clasped his hands at Li Er. Li Er nodded in satisfaction. We heard you speak of the functions of the Gold-Clothed Guard just now and felt that the Gold-Clothed Guard was similar to the 100 Cavalry in terms of martial arts. Thus, we plan to have Li Junxian assist you in establishing the military staff of the Gold-Clothed Guard. Kur, what do you think? As expected, although he had expected this, hearing it from Li Er's mouth made Li Ku feel that everything today was too surreal. If not for the fact that he knew that Li Zixuan had not entered the imperial palace recently, Li Ku would have suspected that Li Zixuan had colluded with Li Er. Otherwise, how could the two of them have the same idea? Royal Father is wise. This son will listen to Royal Father's arrangements. Li Ku realized that he couldn't understand Li Er, so he decided not to think about it. In any case, he just needed to do his own thing well. What other people had planned had nothing to do with him. At the very least, as long as he didn't have any ulterior motives for the throne, no one in the Tang Empire could do anything to him. Yes, if you don't have anything else to report, then go back and prepare. Li Er straightened his body and leaned against the dragon couch. He looked down at Li Ku and said, Yes, Imperial Father, I will take my leave now. Li Ku cupped his hands and left decisively. Today, Li Er's combination of punches had left him in a daze. He had to go home and calm down. With that, he turned around and left. Only Li Er and Zhao Song were left in the main hall. Zhao Song lowered his head and looked straight at the floor of the Sweet Dew Hall, as if there was some secret martial arts manual on the floor. He was so focused and engrossed in it. He didn't want to ask too much about the matters of the royal family, especially when it involved the princes. Although Li Er's decision today was somewhat abnormal, Zhao Song couldn't be bothered to think about whether there was a deeper meaning to it. Because the emperor's will was hard to fathom, he didn't want to guess. If he had the time, he might as well concentrate on meditating on the true meaning of martial arts. Chief Zhao Song was just so real. Li Er looked at Li Ku's back as he left. The smile on his face disappeared and turned into a thoughtful expression. After a long silence, he finally sighed and said, 2 dragons playing with a pearl is more interesting than a single dragon flying. If Kur really has this idea, then Cheng Qian should be under pressure, right? Zhao Song's body froze. As a martial arts grandmaster, his hearing was very sharp. Although Li Er's voice was soft, he still heard every word. This short sentence was full of Li Er's unfathomable shrewdness and foresight. The art of an emperor was indeed terrifying. Chapter 1704. Master, the Marquis of Yong'an is here. Chang'an City West, Duan Residence. Duan Zixuan, who had just finished his morning court session, was preparing to put on his armor and head to the army camp. At this moment, a servant suddenly rushed into the backyard and bowed. Oh? Where is he? Duan Zixuan raised his eyebrows, secretly guessing the purpose of Li Zixuan's visit. At the same time, he asked, Master, this old servant has invited the Marquis of Yong'an to the front hall for tea. The servant bowed and said. Duan Zixuan nodded and said, You have done well. Go and tell the Marquis of Yong'an, this old man will be there soon. Although Li Zixuan was only a marquis, he had an entire province as his fief. Furthermore, he was also the provincial governor of a province. He could be considered as a high-ranking official of the border. His status was no longer the same as before. Now, if he were to be rejected by the Duan residence's servant, it would indeed be very inappropriate. Yes. The servant obeyed and left. Duan Zhixuan could only hang the armor that he had just taken off on the wooden rack at the side. Dressed in his normal clothes, he left the room. How did Marquis have the time to visit this Duan residence today? In the Duan residence's main hall, Li Zixuan sat quietly on a wooden chair. The tea on the side table emitted a faint fragrance, but he did not touch it. He closed his eyes and rested. Suddenly, a burst of hearty laughter came from outside the room. Following that, Duan Zhixuan walked in with majestic step. Li Zixuan's eyes suddenly opened. Then, he hurriedly stood up and went forward to greet him with cupped fists and said, "This subordinate came uninvited. I hope General Duan will not blame me." This subordinate? Duan Zhixuan, who had originally planned to exchange a few pleasantries with Li Zixuan, couldn't help but be taken aback when he heard this. Then, his expression became somewhat interesting. "Marquis, are you planning to join the army after dealing with the external affairs?" Duan Zhixuan was not stupid. In fact, to be able to get to this position, no one was stupid. Almost instantly, he understood the crux of the matter. More than a month ago, Li Zixuan was appointed as the Black Armored Army adjutant. However, due to the Academy's affairs and later on going north to eliminate the locusts, he did not go to the army. Now that Li Zixuan claimed to be his subordinate, he was obviously prepared to join the army. Although Li Zixuan was now calling himself Duan Zhixuan's subordinate, Duan Zhixuan could see that Li Zixuan was neither servile nor overbearing. His aura was even restrained, making him seem even more unfathomable. In comparison, Duan Zhixuan was more like a subordinate. Duan Zhixuan could not help but narrow his eyes. They had not seen each other for more than a month, but Li Zixuan's temperament had changed so much. Although he did not actively release his aura, the restrained aura made Duan Zhixuan feel more unfathomable. He must have made a breakthrough in his martial arts realm. At least, his current martial arts realm is not lower than mine. This was Duan Zhixuan's subconscious judgment. Many people knew about the battle at Longmen Pass in the north, but not many people knew about the details of the battle. Li Zixuan benefited from the disaster and broke through to the Grand Master late stage in that battle, and even fewer people knew about this. However, Duan Zhixuan could tell that Li Zixuan had made a breakthrough in his realm from just one encounter, mainly because Duan Zhixuan's martial arts attainment was also profound. "Yes, I have arranged the matters at the Academy for the time being. More importantly, the new batch of armor needed by the Black Armored Army has been completed by the wonderful Pavilion Workshop. I plan to bring this batch of armor to the barracks tomorrow. In addition, since I will be going to the barracks tomorrow, General Duan, please don't refer to me by my title in the future. Just call me by my name." Li Zixuan clasped his fists and said. Duan Zhixuan was the boss of the Black Armored Army, to be precise, he was the second in command. The boss of the Black Armored Army was always Li Zixuan. To put it bluntly, Li Zixuan was here today to bow to the boss. After all, he knew that the third in command of the Black Armored Army, Qiu Xingong, had always disliked him. How could he not curry favor before entering the barracks? It was not that he was snobbish. The main reason was that he did not want to fight for power with Qiu Xingong. He only wanted to raise the combat strength of the Black Armored Army to a higher level so that the Tang Empire would have a greater chance of defeating the Turk. After completing his mission, even if Qiu Xingong did not allow him to leave, he would still resign from Li Zixuan. His life's dream was not to join the army or fight on the battlefield. However, the life he pursued required a stable environment. In his opinion, with Duan Zhixuan's protection, he would at least be safe in the Black Armored Army. Thus, he was more humble today. Putting this aside, Duan Zhixuan was a person worthy of respect. This person had also made great contributions to the establishment of the Li Tang Empire. Duan Zhixuan's eyes flashed and he immediately recovered from his deep thoughts. He nodded and said, "All right. Since Adjunct Lee is about to return, I will naturally welcome you. Tomorrow morning, the soldiers will be called out. I hope Adjunct Lee can arrive on time." Duan Zhishuan had been in the army for more than a decade and was a straightforward person. Since Li Zishuan was willing to return to the army at this time, he was naturally more than happy to oblige. Disregarding everything else, Li Zishuan's terrifying martial arts prowess was a force to be reckoned with for the black armored troops. Although the military had never advocated individual strength, it still depended on the level of the individual's strength. At present, no army could ignore a martial artist at the Grandmaster realm. If a martial artist at the Grandmaster realm also knew how to lead troops and the art of war, it would undoubtedly be a headache for the enemy. In addition, Li Zishuan was not an ordinary martial scholar. To be able to face the martial scholar Wu Jie head-on and survive, Duan Zhishuan knew that if he were in Li Zishuan's shoes, he would not have such strength. Thus, in terms of individual strength, Li Zishuan was not any weaker than him, the commander of the Black Armored Army. Not to mention, Li Zishuan had brought 5,000 new sets of armor to the Black Armored Army. Duan Zhishuan had personally experienced the power of these new sets of armor, and he was very greedy for them. Therefore, Li Zishuan's arrival would undoubtedly raise the strength of the Black Armored Army to another level. This general obeys. Tomorrow morning, I will definitely not be late. Seeing Duan Zhishuan's decisiveness, Li Zishuan also cupped his fists and accepted the order. Good. Then this general will wait for Adjunct Li in the camp tomorrow. Duan Zhishuan looked at Li Zishuan with appreciation and said in a clear voice, "Yes." After discussing official matters, the two exchanged a few words of greeting before Li Zishuan said his goodbyes. Because he could see that Duan Zhishuan seemed to have something to do, he tactfully took the initiative to say his goodbyes. It just so happened that he had to go to the army camp tomorrow and had to go back today to prepare. Chapter 1705. Xiao Xian, what brings you here today? After leaving the Duan mansion, Li Zishuan did not leave the city immediately. Instead, he went to the Qin mansion. Qin Qiong was Han Yushi's adoptive father, and was one of the closest people to Li Zishuan in Chang'an City. Before he went to the military camp to take up his post, he should have informed Qin Qiong. Coincidentally, Cheng Yaojin was also in the Qin residence. The two brothers had just finished their morning court session and were practicing in the Qin residence's martial arts field. When Li Zishuan suddenly came over, they quickly put down their weapons and greeted him. "Uncle Cheng, you're here too?" Li Zishuan first bowed to Qin Qiong and Cheng Yaojin respectively before stating the purpose of his visit. "Tomorrow, I will be heading to the Black Armored Army's barracks to take up my new post. The Black Armored Army has just been expanded. Before the war, they will definitely be training hard to build up their combat strength. As the Black Armored Army's adjutant, I will probably have to live in the barracks for the next 2 months. Hence, I am here today to inform both of you. In April, in order to quell the rebellion in Guanqing as soon as possible and destroy the Cui and Jing families' rebellious forces, Li Er ordered Li Jing to take command and also sent Duan Zhishuan to lead the Black Armored Army as the vanguard to Guanqing County. Unexpectedly, they encountered the tens of thousands of main forces of the Cui and Jing family. Although the Black Armored Army won that battle, they suffered heavy casualties. Then, the situation between the Tang Empire and the Turks suddenly changed. First, they encountered the Turks in the Battle of Shuafang. Then, the tutor of the Turks, Wu Jie, snuck into the Tang Empire and stole the confidential files of Yanhuang College. Following that, 50,000 elite wolf riders suddenly entered the Tang Empire and headed straight for the Longmen Pass. The two countries were at daggers drawn, and Li Er realized that the war between the two countries was imminent. On one hand, he ordered the officials to prepare for the war seriously. On the other hand, he ordered Duan Jishuan to reorganize the Black Armored Army and expand it from the original 2,000 to 5,000. This was because Li Er believed that cavalry was the most effective when attacking the Turks, and the Black Armored Army was the most elite of the great Tang cavalry. They were the sharpest spear, and in this crucial war, they were bound to play a crucial role. However, the Black Armored Army had just been formed and its overall combat power was obviously not comparable to before. Therefore, Li Zishuan knew that the Black Armored Army's mission for the next few months was nothing more than to train them crazily, to develop into the greatest combat power in the shortest time. He, as the Black Armored Army's adjutant, he would be extremely busy. Oh. You're going to the Black Armored Army camp tomorrow? Qin Xiong's eyes narrowed as his mind raced. He suddenly thought of something and asked, could it be that the 5,000 new sets of armor for the Black Armored troops have been completed? Qin Xiong was very familiar with Li Zishuan's situation. He knew that the reason why Li Zishuan had not been appointed to the Black Armored Army was not only because he was busy with the Academy and the Exterminating Locust mission, but also because it was difficult to complete the new equipment that Li Zishuan had asked Li Zishuan to forge in such a short period of time. Now that Li Zishuan said that he was going to the Black Armored Army, it meant that the 5,000 sets of equipment had been completed. It's indeed completed. Tomorrow, I will bring the equipment to the Black Armored Army's camp. Li Zishuan nodded and said under Qin Xiong's and Cheng Yaojin's eager gazes. The two of them widened their eyes in disbelief. After all, that was 5,000 sets of equipment and armor. How could it be completed in just a month? Even the supervisor of works did not have this ability. The speed at which Li Zishuan's workshop was terrifying. Ha! Good. Little Xian, you're really something. The speed at which you forge weapons is too fast. Oh, right. Do you have any more of the vanadium steel horse lances that you forged? You can give me one as a gift. After a moment of shock, Cheng Yaojin walked to Li Zishuan and patted him on the shoulder as he laughed. That day, Li Zishuan had used the vanadium steel horse lances and wore the vanadium steel plate armor to compete with Duan Jishuan in front of all the officials. Through that competition, the flexibility and toughness of the vanadium steel plate armor and the sharpness of the vanadium steel horse lances had left a deep impression on Li Zishuan and the officials. Cheng Yaojin's most common weapon was also a horse lance. Therefore, Old Cheng had been coveting the vanadium steel horse lance that Li Zishuan had used against Duan Jishuan. Now that he finally had the chance, he could not hold back and directly ask Li Zishuan for it. Qin Xiong turned his face away and pretended that he did not know this old man. It was too embarrassing. Li Zishuan did not mind. On the contrary, he liked Old Cheng's straightforward personality. This nephew knows that Uncle Cheng is good at using horse lances, so I ordered someone to make one for you. In a while, I will send someone to deliver it to your residence. I guarantee that it will be better than the one I used on the drill ground that day. Cheng Yaojin was instantly overjoyed. He laughed and said, "Ha ha! Good, good, good. Little Xian, you know this old man well. Unlike my two brats who don't know how to be filial to their father. They only know how to cause trouble. Oh, right, second brother, why don't you have little Xian make a pair of vanadium steel weapons for you?" In the end, this fellow still wanted to drag Qin Xiong down with him. Qin Xiong shook his head and said, "No need. This old man's golden mace is enough." After saying that, Qin Xiong looked at Li Zishuan and said seriously, "Little Xian, since you have decided to go to the Black Armored Army camp tomorrow, this old man has no reason to stop you. The current situation between the Tang Empire and the Turks can be said to be at daggers drawn. A few days ago, according to the report from the spies in the north, Xieli's army has been active recently. Not only did they deploy a large number of scouts on the Tang Empire's border, Xieli also launched a fierce attack on Tuli in the grassland. It seems that he has completely unified the grassland. Xieli's strength is already very strong. If he is allowed to get rid of Tuli in a short period of time, it will definitely not be good news for the Tang Empire. Therefore, this old man expects that the 3-month deadline set by His Majesty will only be sooner and not later. Little Xian, not only are your martial arts strength excellent, but you are also brave and resourceful. In addition, you are the most familiar with this new batch of armor. If you can join the Black Armored Army and take up the position, this old man believes that it will be very helpful in increasing the Black Armored Army's combat power. It's just that your nature is undisciplined and you don't like to be restrained. However, once you enter the army camp, you have to abide by the military rules. Moreover, you have to set an example. Only then can you convince the others. Do you understand? Compared to Qing Yaojin, Qin Xiong was undoubtedly much more reliable. Qin Xiong patiently explained to Li Zixuan the current situation and the things to pay attention to after entering the army. This nephew understands. Many thanks for Uncle Qin's reminder. Hearing that there were strange movements on the Tang Empire's northern border and that Xieli had launched a general attack on Tuli, Li Zixuan was shocked. At the same time, a sense of urgency rose in his heart. It seemed that Xieli had already sensed the Tang Empire's next move on the grassland. He was already making preparations in advance. Chapter 1706. Haha. You're right. We have to abide by the military rules. Even if I'm in the military camp, I'm no exception. But Xiaoxian, if you're bullied in the military camp, don't worry about it. Just beat them back. Anyway, you're now a master at the late stage of the Supreme Power Realm. No one in the Black Armored Army can beat you. If you can't beat them, I'll go and help you. Compared to Qin Xiong's maturity, Qing Yaojin was undoubtedly more forthright and straightforward. This old fellow had just received benefits from Li Zixuan, so he naturally had to stand up and say a few words. However, given his relationship with Li Zixuan, even if he didn't receive any benefits, he would be the first to stand up for Li Zixuan if he was bullied. Li Zixuan smiled. Old Cheng's words obviously meant something. He was worried that he would be bullied after entering the Black Armored Army. Thinking of this, Li Zixuan was a little touched. He clasped his hands and said, "This nephew appreciates Uncle Cheng's good intentions. But don't worry, I won't let anyone bully me." Even if Qiu Xingong wanted to bully him after entering the Black Armored Army, Li Zixuan planned to solve it himself. He was already an adult. Of course, he had to get back the face he had lost. Haha. Good. You're a little like me when I was young. Good. Qing Yaojin couldn't help laughing. He didn't know whether this old guy was praising Li Zixuan or himself. Okay. Xiaoxian. Since you're in Chang and today, don't go back at noon. I'll ask your aunt to get some good wine and dishes. Let's have a good drink at noon. Qin Xiong didn't want Qing Yaojin to continue boasting, so he interrupted. You can tell us how you broke through to the late stage of the Supreme Power Realm this time. Before Li Zixuan could say anything, Qing Yaojin's eyes immediately lit up. Old Qing nodded repeatedly and said, Yes. Little Xian, you have to accompany me, Old Qing, and second brother for a few drinks today. Speaking of which, after you go to the military camp, you won't be able to drink even if you want to. Haha. I won't hide it from you. The 12 guards of the capital have all begun their training. In 2 days, this old man will be living in the barracks every day. Qing Yaojin did not care about Li Zixuan's martial arts strength at all because he knew that he had long been surpassed by Li Zixuan in martial art. Moreover, at his age, even if he wanted to catch up, he would definitely not be able to. Therefore, Old Qing had already developed a certain immunity to Li Zixuan's monstrous martial arts talent. Compared to this, he preferred drinking. He felt that in terms of alcohol tolerance, he could definitely beat Li Zixuan. Since the 2 uncles are so kind to invite me, then I won't stand on ceremony. Li Zixuan thought about it and finally agreed. According to his original plan, he had come to tell Qin Qiong about it and then returned to Lantian County. However, since the war in the north, he, Qin Qiong, and Cheng Yaojin had not met again. Previously, the two old generals had led the army thousands of miles to help Longmen Pass. This was all friendship. How could he not agree to such a small request? What's more, he had just heard from Cheng Yaojin that the 12 guards of the capital had begun their training, which was enough to show how serious the current situation was. Recently, he had been dealing with the affairs of the academy on Cloud Mountain and did not know much about the situation at the foot of the mountain, especially the situation in the imperial court. It was better to take advantage of this lunch to understand the current situation from Cheng Yaojin and Qin Qiong. Chapter 1707. Fragrant. Qin Estate. When it was close to noon, the maidservants of the Qin estate brought over numerous fragrant dishes from the kitchen. Old Cheng couldn't help but take a deep breath, and then he couldn't help but click his tongue in praise. Second brother, the culinary skills of the chefs in your estate are really getting better and better. This taste is almost on par with the immortal indulgence in. Qin Qiong couldn't help but glare at Cheng Yaojin and say, "What, chef? These dishes were all made by your sister-in-law herself." A second sister-in-law actually made them herself? Cheng Yaojin was shocked and said in disbelief. It's rare for little Xian and Jijie to be here today. I have to personally cook and entertain you. As they were talking, Madame Qin walked in with 2 maidservants carrying plates and said with a smile. Old Ching chuckled and said, "Ha ha, sister-in-law, you're doing this on account of little Xian, right? Looks like I'm still riding on little Xian's coattails today." This old fellow often came to the Qin family to freeload, but it was usually the servants in the manor who cooked. Why would Madame Qin cook personally? Madame Qin scolded, "Nonsense. When you come to the Qin manor, has the Qin manor ever shortchanged you?" Although she said that, everyone knew that it was just a joke between the two of them and couldn't be taken seriously. Li Zixuan stood up and said, "Thank you for your hospitality, Auntie. Auntie, sit down and eat with us." Madame Qin smiled and said, No, you guys eat first. The chicken is still stewing over there. Auntie has to take care of it." "Oh right. Little Xian, why didn't you bring Yushi with you today? Auntie hasn't seen her in a long time." Han Yushi was the adopted daughter of Qin Qiong and Madame Qin. Because of Li Zixuan, Han Yushi was even closer to the Qin family. The two families were also very close, which was why Madame Qin said that. Li Zixuan hurriedly said, "I came to Chang and to do something today, so I didn't bring my wife along. I'll get her to visit Auntie another day." Good. Then Auntie will help you get the chicken soup. Eat quickly." Madame Qin nodded and smiled in satisfaction before turning to leave. "All right. Little Xian, Jijie, eat up." At this moment Qin Qiong, as the host, hurriedly called out, "Ha! Come on. We haven't gathered since we came back from the north, right? Let's drink first." Cheng Yaojin laughed and unceremoniously poured himself a cup as he shouted loudly. There were only the 3 of them at the table. Qin Huaiyu was still at the academy. After old Cheng shouted, the atmosphere at the table immediately became lively. "Good. This little nephew toasts Uncle Cheng and Uncle Qin. Previously, the 2 uncles led an army from afar to rescue us. This nephew will remember this friendship." Ever since Li Zixuan grasped the trick of drinking, although he still did not like drinking, he was no longer afraid of drinking. Hearing this, he raised his wine cup, stood up, and raised his cup to Cheng Yaojin and Qin Qiong. Qin Qiong said seriously, "Xiao Xian, we are family. Jijie and I treat you as our family's younger generation. If something happens to you, how can we sit still at home? It's only right that I lead the army to save you." Qing Yaojin interrupted, "Ha ha. Second brother is right. We are all family. Why are you being so polite? Come on. Cheers." After saying that, old Qing raised his neck and drank the wine in his cup in one gulp. "Good. Cheers." Qin Xiong and Li Zixuan also followed suit and drank the wine in their cups in one gulp. "Ha ha. Good wine and good food. Why didn't you call me? Shu Bao Jijie, you guys are too unkind." After a round of wine, Qing Yaojin, this old fellow, was preparing to continue pouring wine for Li Zixuan. At this time, a burst of energetic and familiar laughter came from outside the room. Who else could it be other than Li Er? When the three people in the house heard Li Er's voice, they were all shocked. Everyone quickly put down their wine cups and stood up to welcome him. They bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." As the host, Qin Xiong bowed and apologized, "Your Majesty has come to my humble abode. This old official has not welcomed you. I hope that Your Majesty will forgive me." Li Er went forward to help Qin Xiong up and said, Shu Bao, what are you doing? I'm only here to drink and freeload today. Let's skip the formalities. Speaking of which, how long has it been since we've gathered to drink together?" Although Qin Xiong did not believe Li Er's nonsense that he was only here to drink, the latter half of Li Er's sentence still made him fall silent. That's right, ever since Li Er started the change in the Xuanwu Gate and ascended to the throne, they had never sat at the same table to drink and eat meat again, right? Your Majesty must be joking. Please come in. Qin Xiong quickly recovered from his deep thoughts. He quickly turned his body and invited Li Er in. Li Er nodded and walked in with his hands behind his back. However, when he walked in front of Li Zixuan, he stared expressionlessly at Li Zixuan. This stare made Li Zixuan's heart skip a beat. Although there was one more person at the table, the atmosphere was not as lively as before. No matter how much Qing Yaojin, Qin Xiong, and Li Er had gone through life and death together on the battlefield and called each other brothers, now that Li Er had become the emperor, it was impossible for them to return to their previous state. "Why are you here in Chang'an City today? Have you settled the matters at the academy?" After 3 rounds of wine, Li Er looked at Li Zixuan and asked lightly. Li Zixuan quickly replied, "Your Majesty, the academy released the results today. This year's enrollment has been completely completed. In addition, the 5,000 sets of armor for the Black Armored Army have been completed. I plan to bring the new equipment to the Black Armored Army camp tomorrow to take up my post. That's why I came to Chang'an City today to inform General Duan." The 5,000 sets of armor for the Black Armored Army have been completed? Although Li Er had already guessed this, he could not hide his surprise when he heard Li Zixuan say it with his own ears. Previously, Yen Lide had roughly calculated with him that if they were to follow the new style of armor invented by Li Zixuan, it would be impossible for the Ministry of Works and the craftsmen of the General Work Supervisor to complete the 5,000 sets of armor in 3 months. Now, Li Zixuan's workshop had only used slightly more than a month to complete the 5,000 sets of armor, vanadium steel horse lances, and vanadium steel horse armor. This speed made Li Er envious. If it wasn't for the Emperor's reputation, he really wanted to snatch Li Zixuan's strange interest pavilion workshop, because this workshop could be considered a national treasure. "Yes, Your Majesty. The 5,000 sets of armor have been completed and can be sent to the Black Armored Army camp at any time." Li Zixuan was a little flustered by Li Er's wolf-like gaze. Even so, he braced himself and replied. Chapter 1708. Haha. Good. Good. In Qin's mansion, Li Zixuan was elated to hear Li Zixuan's reply. Although he coveted Li Zixuan's workshop, he could not show it. He laughed and said, "The Black Armored Army has just expanded. If you can finish these armors as soon as possible, Duan Zixuan will be able to arrange for the soldiers to train and familiarize themselves with the new equipment. Besides, you are the most familiar with the new equipment. With you assisting Duan Jishuan in managing the military affairs, it will also help the Black Armored Army to become stronger. Li Zishuan hurriedly said, I will do my best and spare no effort. What a great do your best and do your best. You are going to the military camp tomorrow, and you are already in Chang'an. Why don't you report to me? Suddenly, Elder Li's face darkened as he looked at Li Zishuan. Sure enough, old Li was here to settle accounts with him. Li Zishuan muttered in his heart. Then, he quickly pretended to be in fear and trepidation and said, Your Majesty, please forgive me. You are always busy with state affairs. I just don't want to disturb Your Majesty over such a small matter. Li Er shot a glance at Li Zishuan and said crossly, You, punk, have a glib tongue. All right. I am too lazy to argue with you. Then, he drank a cup of wine and asked, Regarding the current situation in the north, Shu Bao has told you, right? Speaking of serious matters, Li Zishuan no longer had the mood to continue eating and drinking. He nodded and said, Uncle Qin has already told this subject. What do you think? Li Er looked at Li Zishuan with interest and asked. He really hoped to hear Li Zishuan's unique views on the situation between the two countries. Li Zishuan had been in the imperial court for more than a year, and he always had a unique view on every problem. This was also one of the reasons why he chose to leave the palace and come to Qin's mansion today. Qin Xiong and Qing Yaojin had also put down their chopsticks and wine cups and looked over. At this time, there were only the four of them in the main hall. Some of the servants and maids had already been ordered to leave by Qin Xiong. On one hand, it was for Li Er's safety. On the other hand, it was to prevent Li Er from revealing any confidential state affairs during the meal. Li Zishuan thought for a moment and said slowly, Your Majesty, I think that since Xieli secretly deployed his troops at the border between the two countries and launched a general attack on Tuli's troops in the grasslands, it proves that he already knows or guessed that the imperial court has a plan to attack the grasslands. Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty's 6 yamen, civil and military, civil and military, civil and military, civil and military, all officials to prepare for war. Such a big movement, such a big movement. Such a big movement. So Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty's so Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, Your Majesty, your so. Li Er's eyes flashed and he said, Your analysis is reasonable. Then, what do you think the imperial court should do in the face of the current situation? I originally planned to secretly prepare the army for war and catch Xieli off guard 2 months later. But now, it's obvious that Xieli is already on guard. Moreover, he seems to be more anxious than I am to carry out the war. In this way, what do you think the Tang Empire's chances of winning this war are? Li Zishuan frowned and said, Your Majesty, the Tang Empire and the Turks are the two most powerful countries in the world today. In such a big national war, to secretly catch the other side off guard, Your Majesty, I think this is an impossible task. It's only a matter of time before Xieli finds out that the imperial court is secretly preparing the army for war. But it seems that Xieli found out about it earlier this time. But Your Majesty, thinks that all these are not important because the main factor that determines the victory of a war is still the hard power of both sides. Since Xieli has already sensed the imperial court's intention to attack the grasslands, then before the war truly begins, we should make complete preparations. We cannot fight a war without preparation. Li Er nodded his head and said, This emperor knows that to forge iron, one must be strong. Therefore, a few days ago, all the soldiers of the 12 capital guards had already started training together. The officials from the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Revenue, and the Ministry of War have already begun preparing military supplies, allocating funds, and deducing battle tactics more than half a month ago, all for the sake of winning this tough battle. Li Zishuan thought for a moment, then said with a serious face, "Your Majesty, forgive me for being so bold, but I don't think this is enough." Li Er's brows raised and he said doubtfully, "Oh? Do you have any better suggestions? Tell me." Li Zishuan didn't hesitate for a moment. He gritted his teeth and said, "Your Majesty, I believe that the mobilization of the 6 yamans and the 12 guards of the capital isn't enough. The Tang Empire should be fully prepared for war. Issue the war mobilization order to every single citizen. Our Tang Empire implements a government army system. The citizens usually farm and join the army in times of war. Ever since the imperial court purged all the rebellious forces in the Tang Empire, the world gradually became peaceful. Many of the soldiers who fought on the battlefield and experienced hundreds of battles have all retired. Among these people, even if some of them don't have outstanding martial arts, they are all veterans who have experienced hundreds of battles. They have rich battle experience. To the Tang Empire, they are an immeasurable amount of wealth. I believe that as long as the imperial court summons these veterans, as long as their blood is still warm, they will definitely be willing to put on their armor and go to war again. If these people are integrated into an army, not only can they form a fighting force in a short period of time, their fighting force is definitely not to be underestimated. I believe that in this decisive battle of life and death, the Tang Empire must go all out and not have any mercy or slack off. This time, the Turks must be completely killed. Veterans were wealth, whether it was in modern times or ancient times. Veterans were not old, but they had experience and experience. They had more battle experience and knew how to cooperate on the battlefield and how to survive. Some people said that a veteran on the battlefield was equivalent to 10 new recruits. Li Zishuan agreed with this very much. This was especially true now that the Great Tang was using a government army system. In peacetime, the government soldiers were farmers who cultivated the land, trained during the farm breaks, and joined the army in times of war. The government soldiers had to prepare their own weapons and horses for war, and the entire country had a government that was responsible for selecting and training the government soldiers. Ever since Wang Shichong was killed in the 4th year of Wuda, the Great Tang had been at peace for 6 or 7 years, of course, not counting the coup at the Xuanwu Gate and the Wei River Alliance. In these 6 or 7 years, the number of government soldiers in the government was far less than it had been in the 4th year of Wuda. The main reason was that many government soldiers had retired. This was why Li Zishuan had made this proposal. He believed that once the war between the Great Tang and the Turkic Khaganate broke out, the strength of the 12 garrison guards and the black armored army was far from enough. They needed to select a group of seasoned soldiers from the various regions. This was both respect and trust for the veterans. Chapter 1709. Recruit veterans? I didn't expect you to value those veterans so much. In the Qin residence, after Li Zishuan finished his long speech, Cheng Yaojin and Qin Qiong's eyes lit up. Li Er was silent for a moment before he looked at Li Zishuan and said, "What you said is actually not without reason. For this attack on the Turks, I originally planned to send 300,000 soldiers. These 300,000 soldiers will be transferred from the 12 guards of Chang'an. Along the way, I will recruit the elite soldiers of the various provinces to expand the army to 400,000 soldiers. At that time, the 12 guards of the capital will be the main force, and the elite soldiers of the various provinces will play a supporting role. However, after hearing what you said, it is a bit of a waste to only send the soldiers to assist the 12 guards. Since that is the case, I have decided to announce to the world that I will select 150,000 elite soldiers from the various provinces and send them to Chang'an within a month. At that time, I will send a few generals to personally lead these soldiers. When we attack the grasslands, they will also be the main force. However, this will cause the national treasury to be tight. Although the soldiers of the Tang Empire would prepare their own weapons and horses when they were in a war, Li Er had changed his plan and decided to let the selected elite soldiers come to Chang'an for training 1 month in advance. Behind this decision, the imperial court would have to pay an extra 1 month's worth of food for 150,000 soldiers. This was not a small amount. Your Majesty, this subject believes that we cannot be stingy with money and food at the crucial moment of the national war. If the Great Tang is defeated in this war, there will be no way for it to rise again. Hearing this, Li Zishuan was secretly anxious. He thought to himself, what kind of situation is this? You're still worrying about money and food? Are all emperors so stingy? When Li Er heard this, he immediately glared at Li Zishuan and said, Brat, you don't know the cost of food until you are in charge of the household. Do you know how much money and armor will be used for 150,000 soldiers in a month? The assault of 450,000 soldiers on the grasslands was bound to be a protracted battle. The amount of money and food consumed on the road would be astronomical. Although the national treasury had saved up some money over the past year, the plague of locusts had more or less damaged the imperial court's vitality. If we can't take down the Turks in 4 months, the imperial court will very likely be dragged down by this war. Li Zishuan's expression turned solemn as he said, Your Majesty, you've misunderstood me. This subject has already said that I want the entire Great Tang to prepare for war. This includes not only the guards of Chang'an, not only the officials of the 6 bureaus, and not only the elites of the various prefectures, but also the landowning clans, merchants, and ordinary civilians. This battle concerns the fate of my Great Tang for the next several hundred years. If we win, my Great Tang will have one less powerful enemy, and the northern border will be peaceful for at least 50 years. If we lose, all the Tang people will become slaves of a fallen country, prisoners of the Turks. This subject believes that as long as the common people are clear about the pros and cons, they will definitely support the imperial court. Those who have money will contribute money, and those who have strength will contribute strength. This is the strength of the entire nation to prepare for war against the Turks. In this way, this subject does not believe that the imperial court will be worn down by the long supply lines, much less that the Great Tang will lose to the Turks. Li Zishuan's words caused Qing Yaojin and Qin Qiong's blood to surge. What did it mean to prepare for war? This was what it meant to prepare for war. If they could really unite the hearts of the common people of Great Tang, defeating the powerful Turks would not be a problem. However, uniting the hearts of the common people was easier said than done. When the two thought of this, their surging hearts gradually calmed down. How could Li Eru not understand this principle? He frowned and said, Brat, your words are easy to say, but doing it will be harder than ascending to the heavens. Even though the world has been peaceful for many years, the lives of the common people are still very difficult. Asking them to fork out money is something that we cannot do. As the emperor of a country, Li Eru had his own pride. It was already difficult for an emperor like him to compete with the common people. If he were to ask for money from the common people, Li Eru felt that it would be better for the country to be destroyed. As an emperor, he could not afford to lose face like this. It had to be said that Emperor Li Eru's worldview was still very upright, a little too upright. Li Zishuan choked for a moment. After pausing for a moment, he cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, the common people are indeed suffering, but there are many rich merchants and noble clans. This war is also related to their interests. They have the ability and the obligation to support this war. Your subjects' intention is to ask them to fork out some money and food to ensure that the imperial court's attack on the Turks will be successful. Li Eru's eyes narrowed and he said meaningfully, Do you know that it is harder than ascending to the heavens to get those merchants and noble clans to fork out money? The richer a person was, the more stingy they would be. Li Eru naturally understood this principle. Even though those aristocratic clans were all very wealthy, asking them to voluntarily donate money to fill the national treasury, he believed that no one would be willing to do so. Li Zishuan insisted, "Your Majesty, your subject believes that such stingy people who can't see the big picture are in the minority. If your Majesty is still worried, your subject can first ask the Yan Huang Chamber of Commerce to mobilize all the merchants in the world to donate money. All the money donated will be used in this war against the Turks. When the time comes, if all the merchants respond and gather, how can those noble clans not fork out a single coin?" Li Er was speechless for a moment. Even though he was unwilling to compete with the common people, he knew that this war with the Turks would be a bitter one. Especially in the battle in the north half a month ago, the unparalleled strength of the Turks' wolf cavalry had cast a shadow over his heart. Under such circumstances, the great Tang would obviously not be able to defeat the Turks in a short period of time. In that case, the imperial court would be dragged into the quagmire of war and fall into a predicament of financial difficulties. After all, this long supply line required a huge amount of manpower, material, and financial resources. It was completely different from the Great Tang's previous wars to quell internal rebellions. "Good. We will do as you say. Let's see if the merchants in the world will be as generous as you say." After a long silence, Li Eru finally spoke. "Your subject obeys." Li Zishuan cupped his hands and replied, "Your Majesty, other than gathering funds from the common people and mobilizing the entire country's strength to support the national war, your subject believes that the imperial court should not sit back and watch Xieli gather his superior forces to eliminate Tuli and unify the entire grassland. Right now, Xieli's forces are already huge. If we sit back and watch him unify the grassland in this war, the imperial court's army will probably have a harder time winning." Hearing this, the eyes of the three lit up. Li Eru quickly asked, "Oh? Then what plan do you have? Quickly tell us." Chapter 17:10. Your Majesty, although most of the tribes of the steppe have already submitted to Xieli, this does not mean that the steppe is a monolithic block. Previously, the Turkic Khitan chieftain led his tribes to submit to the Great Tang, and now, Tuli is stubbornly resisting Xieli. This shows that there are still many tribes of the steppe who are not of the same mind as Xieli, and we must make good use of this point to obstruct Xieli from unifying the steppe. In the Qin residence, Li Zishuan slowly analyzed Li Er's question. This subject believes that the imperial court should immediately dispatch an emissary to secretly infiltrate the steppe with your Majesty's imperial edict. The imperial edict states that Tuli will be conferred the title of King of the Great Tang, and any Turkic tribes that submit to the Great Tang will be richly rewarded. In the current situation, Tuli Kaghan and Xieli are already like fire and water. Your Majesty can dispatch people to use Tuli as a foundation to develop tribal forces on the steppe to resist Xieli and divide the Turks from within as much as possible. In addition, the imperial court can also deploy a large number of troops on the northern border to exert pressure on Xieli, making him somewhat apprehensive and not daring to use all his forces to suppress the rebel forces within the Turks. This way, the Great Tang will have time to prepare for war. In truth, this method of dividing the Turks from within had long been considered by Li Zishuan. At the very least, when the imperial court dispatched troops to encircle and suppress Liang Shidu several months ago, he had already thought of doing it. But at that time, the struggle between Tuli and Xieli had not yet reached its climax, and Li Zishuan had not yet dispatched troops to attack the Turks. Thus, Li Zishuan did not have the opportunity to propose this method of dividing the Turks. At present, the Great Tang and the Turks were at daggers drawn, clearly in a state where war could break out at any time. Moreover, Xieli clearly wanted to eliminate the rebel forces on the steppe in the shortest amount of time possible and then concentrate all his forces on dealing with the Great Tang. In this critical situation, it was clearly necessary to divide the Turks. Li Er's eyes brightened, but after thinking for a moment, he shook his head. Although your plan is good, at this time, the steppe is no different from a dragon's pool or a tiger's den to the Tang. Of all the civil and military officials in the court, who would dare to go to the Turks and carry out your plan? In addition, Tuli's heart favors the great Tang because he had some friendship with me in the past. But it's hard to say for the other tribes on the prairie. To have them betray Shili because of some official titles and benefits, I'm afraid it's not very likely. Li Er was a pragmatic emperor. He was not like the emperors of the later generations who stayed in the palace for a long time and rarely left the palace. He was very clear about the outside world and the ways of the world, so his views were often very realistic. Given the current disparity in strength between the Great Tang and the Turks, any outsider who was not biased would favor the Turks over the Great Tang, let alone the other tribal chiefs of the steppe. It was believed that most people on the grassland believed that Shili was invincible, at least for the Tang Empire. On the other hand, Li Zishuan was already prepared. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Your Majesty, let's not talk about the candidates sent by the imperial court to the Turkic Khaganate, but it's actually not difficult to make the other tribes of the grasslands side with the Tang Empire. We have an excellent opportunity right now." What opportunity? The curiosity in Li Er's heart was immediately aroused. Then he said with some annoyance, "Kid, if you have any ideas, just say it. Don't keep me guessing." As an emperor, Li Er certainly liked the feeling of having everything under his control. Of course, not to mention the emperor, even ordinary people did not like others keeping them guessing. Li Zishuan was so depressed that he was about to vomit blood. He thought to himself, "When did I keep you guessing? Can't I say it one by one? What's the hurry?" Although he was depressed, he still had to talk about serious matters. Li Zishuan cupped his hands and hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, I wonder if you still remember the prophecy that at the end of July, there will be frost in midsummer in the Turkic Khaganate?" Although this question was suspected of keeping Li Er guessing again, Li Zishuan had to ask. It was said that important people tended to forget things. Who asked Li Er to be an important person among important people? It had been nearly 10 days since he had returned to the imperial court and told Li Er that the Turkic Khaganate would have abnormal weather at the end of July this year. It was hard to guarantee that Li Er would not forget this matter. When these words were said, Cheng Yaojin and Qin Xiong were both shocked. The two of them looked at each other and could see a trace of shock in each other's eyes. Frost in the 7th month. This kind of thing sounded inconceivable. How could Li Zishuan say it in front of Li Er? However, when they thought of the prophecy that Li Zishuan had said last year that there would be a plague of locusts in the 2nd year of Jingguan, Cheng Yaojin and Qin Xiong had no choice but to believe this absurd prophecy of frost in the 7th month. Li Er frowned. His mind immediately recalled the conversation he had with Li Zishuan in the Sweet Dew Hall that day. His expression became solemn and he said with a frown, "Zhen naturally remembers." Only then did Li Zishuan continue, "The perfect opportunity this subject spoke of is at the end of the 7th month, when the Turkic Khaganate will have abnormal weather in midsummer. As the saying goes, strange phenomena appear in troubled times. These strange phenomena also indicate that the country is about to fall. The emissary sent by your Majesty can use this prophecy to bewitch the tribes on the grasslands who are outwardly united but inwardly divided against Shili. Tell them that strange phenomena will soon appear on the grasslands and that the Turkic Khaganate will soon be completely destroyed. Let these tribal chiefs choose a good tree to rest in as soon as possible. If they do not believe, they can wait a few more days. When the white frost descends on the grasslands at the end of the month, they will have no choice but to believe. At that time, the emissary sent by the imperial court will then explain to these tribal chiefs their feelings and use them for benefits. It will be twice the result with half the effort and yield unexpected results. At that time, it will be difficult for Shili to completely eliminate Tuli Khan in a short period of time. This is because those tribal chiefs who believe in the prophecy will definitely not let go of this opportunity to perform. With them working together with Tuli Khan to stall Xieli, our chances of victory in the decisive battle with Xieli 2 months later will be greater. Li Er's eyes widened. At this time, his chest could be said to be surging with emotions. Li Zishuan's plan to divide the Turkic Khaganate gave him an impulse to slap the table and praise. This plan could directly reverse the outcome of this national war. It could also save the Tang Empire from sacrificing thousands of soldiers this time. It was too crucial. Good. 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 This plan is very good. After being excited for a while, Li Er could not help but clap his hands and laugh. Then, he was not stingy with his praise as he said, "Divide the Turkic Khaganate from within the grasslands and let the tribal chiefs of the other tribes help Tuli stall Xieli. Then, after we have readied our troops, we will kill our way into the grasslands and have a showdown with Xieli. In this way, victory is certain." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.